All right, what's up, guys? It is RC Apologist doing a impromptu live stream today, and we're doing this for the sake of educating people to deal with the certain apologetic method that's being used. Well, not necessarily apologetic, but rather a form of, shall we say, atheistic proselytizing. And what I mean by that is the thing known as street epistemology, as you can tell from the title of the video. Now, street epistemology is basically a thing that was first gotten popularized by a book called A Manual for Creating Atheists. It's basically at its core based on this is from the website just streetepistemology.com. That is the a dialectically based, grounded in the Socratic method, and enhanced by recent evidence-based advances from a wide spectrum of disciplines such as motivational interviewing, applied philosophy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. So the other points it mentions, it's the application of epistemology, the study of knowledge, outside of formal academic context. A fun and effective way to talk to people about what's really true. A conversational tool that helps people reflect on the reliability of the methods used to arrive at their deeply held beliefs. And also, they say the process of identifying, understanding, and challenging beliefs claimed by asking questions. So the main focus is that they have is asking questions, but they usually do it. And of course, this depends on who you talk to, because some are honest and are actually genuine, but then you have some who are knowing what the answers are to the questions and such, but they want to ask other people mainly for the purpose of getting them to doubt and to cause a lack of faith. So that's the one goal that comes from street epistemology. All right, so with this being in mind, and there are people that have actually been influenced by it, I believe one guy, I think his name is Objective Dan, was someone who was interacting with a street epistemologist, and this is how the person then became an atheist. If I'm not mistaken, as to that being the YouTube user that is out there. But there's a thing that I've read a while back that I think Christians need to start learning for the sake of dealing with these kinds of people. Because here's the thing. The Socratic method is a good way to engage in dealing with truth. And there's actually another group, another type of method that is like this, but it's a Christian version, but it aims to be getting people to actually think rather than simply to just have doubts, but rather to just think more critically. And this is where comes the book Tactics by Gregory Kokel, which is a good book that goes over multiple tactics that we'll learn about besides what we're going to see in the video, as well as going over tips on how to deal with certain people. So what we're going to do is play a clip from a lecture that was given, and we'll see we're going to comment on that and see what we think of this. This is called the Columbo tactic. I'm going to screen share my thing real quick. So here it is. We're going to present to everyone. So this is Gregory Kokel with the introduction to the Columbo tactic in Christian apologetics. So on the count of three, I'm going to begin in 3, 2, 1. Oh, hold up. Having a little bit of problems with the lag there. All right. Now 3, 2, 1.
Now, this first tactic is one that I call the queen mother of all tactics. It's the tactic I use more than any other. It's a very, very effective tactic when combined with other tactics. It's the simplest tactic imaginable to stop a challenger in his tracks and to turn the tables and to get him thinking. It's an almost effortless way to put you in the driver's seat. And I call it the Columbo tactic. Now, you remember Lieutenant Columbo. You know, he's that detective on TV. He's got that certain way about himself. He's got this old trench coat he wears, looks like he slept in it. Maybe he did. He's got that stub of a cigar, right? And a little pad of paper, but he's never got a pencil. He's always got to be digging around for his pencil. He can't find it anywhere. And he walks around the crime scene scratching his head, looking kind of stupid. I mean, this guy looks stupid, but he's stupid like a fox. He looks like he can't think his way out of a wet paper bag, but he's got a plan. And at some point, you'll see him. You know how he does that. He'll be walking around totally befuddled, scratching his head, thinking. And at some point, he stops, and he says something like this. I don't know. There's something about this thing that bothers me. Do you mind if I ask you a question? You know how he does that, right? And he gets his answer back. Oh, yeah, well, you're very intelligent. One more thing. And then he one more tings them to death, right? Question after question after question. And people get annoyed. And he says, I know I'm driving you crazy, but I can't help myself. It's a habit. And this is a habit that you ought to get into. The key to the Columbo tactic is using carefully selected questions to disarm the other person and to productively advance the conversation. Listen, if you don't know where to go in any particular circumstance, you find yourself stonewalled, just ask a question. Never make an assertion when a question will do. Don't start preaching at somebody right away. Try to find some way to advance your point by using questions instead. And with a little planning and a little practice, this can become second nature. Now, this approach offers tremendous advantages. Questions, for example, are interactive. They invite others to participate in what you have to say. Questions can make headway without even having you expose your point of view. You know, I encourage people who are at work and they're not allowed to witness, tell people about Christ or talk about religious things, that instead of talking about it themselves is just to ask the questions, because when you ask the questions, you're not stating your point of view. Questions also can serve to shift the burden of proof on the other person if they're making the claim. But most importantly, these questions, using the Columbo tactic, keeps you in the driver's seat. Now, some of you might know Hugh Hewitt. He's a national broadcaster, a conservative guy, great Christian guy, and a fine ambassador for Christ. And he's written a tremendous little book called In But Not Of. And it's got 60 or so chapters. They're all short vignettes that are meant to instruct you on how to be a more effective ambassador for Jesus Christ, essentially. And one of his chapters is entitled, Ask at least half a dozen questions in every conversation. Now, why does he say that? Because he knows that when you ask the questions, the other person actually thinks you're kind of interesting and a good conversationalist. You're drawing them out, but they think you're the interesting one. Interested is interesting. But secondly, when you ask the questions, you are the one that is in control.
All right. So that was the introduction to the main one that we're going to utilize, and I think will be helpful in engaging with some of these, and that is the Columbo tactic. So first of all, before we continue with that, let's get a little insight on what was presented there from some of the people, because we have Hunter Bailey of Sentinel Apologetics, who is joining us with helping of the demonstration and reviewing over some of these tactics. And then we got JMD Apologetics, who is with us as well. So let's start with Hunter. Hunter, based on what you just heard, what are your thoughts on the Columbo tactic as was presented by Greg Kokel?
Well, I think it was actually good demonstration, especially with the idea to ask questions that not only just are any general idea, but he used the word kind of to advance the conversation. So I think it's actually really good to actually ask those kind of questions, because you really get down to the roots of things. You really get down to the nitty gritty, and you actually get deep in order to actually find out where the person is trying to go to. So I think that was good at the very beginning.
All right. That's very good. All right. JMD, do you want to comment? Because I know you said you've read tactics. So based on that whole thing, what you've read, what do you think of this particular thing, specifically the Columbo tactic that we're dealing with?
Well, I'm reading. I've read about the Columbo tactic before I started reading tactics. Well, I know Greg Kokel, but I asked him some questions about. First, I love the first question. What do you mean by that? Because when I've encountered some atheists, this is very effective. When you ask them, well, what do you mean by this? If they can't define what they're trying to push on you, then they have to think about, and they have the burden of proof to at least define what they mean. And then I believe the next question is, well, have you ever considered and then you give another view of that. And what's the third question? What do you mean by that? Have you ever considered? I can't remember the last question.
Right.
What was it again?
What, the question that he asked?
Yeah, well, with the Columbo tactic, there's 3 questions.
Forget because it's been a while since I had read it, but I've read the entire book. But there was like mainly the questions that he asked. It's just simply that, just asking questions. So there's like several different ways that you can go about it. Like, what do you mean by that being a good one of them?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like any kind of ways that you can mostly approach it, based on what the book says. Like another one being like, how do you come to that conclusion?
Yes, that's it. Yep.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. There's going to be some people that say that, they're going to have an idea of this is what Christianity is, or what a certain doctrine ultimately results in, or something like that. Apologetics. So the dynamic duo is finally here.
The dynamic duo.
Hey, it's got to be said.
So maybe Belafex was still around.
Oh yeah.
So you missed it. Actually, we just played the introduction of the Columbo tactic, and what that is. So ultimately, what it is, and I'll see if I can find. There's a definition to give a short version in the in this little thing here in the book. But the Columbo tactic is basically one of the many tactics we're about to go over. And the Columbo tactic, have you ever seen the television show Lieutenant Columbo? Rob?
Nope. No.
All right, well, it's based off of him, and the main thing is, like, as they were pointing out, that he looks like a rookie amateur cop that couldn't solve a crime, but he goes around, and he's very smart in that he's asking a lot of questions. And whenever he asks a question, it's like, oh, that's very smart. Oh, one more thing. And he keeps one more thing in them until he, gets to solving the case, and eventually can even get the culprit to slip up and out himself out. So
the memes are based on the where it goes Columbo.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Okay.
But it's a good show. I would recommend it to anybody that's definitely, because this will definitely be helpful if you want to learn this and check what he does in the show, because it's very intense the way he does it, especially the episode where he goes after Leonard Nimoy, who's I guess trying to murder people through accidental hospital incidents, and so he's trying to catch him up in how he's doing the procedures and such. So here's the thing: asking questions like, "What do you mean by that?" or how did you come to that conclusion? Or just asking questions in general is ultimately what the Columbo tactic is, that you're trying to ask questions to not only understand the person's worldview and progress the conversation, but if there is a bit of inconsistency in what they believe, then that will show itself. So that's why you have to ask questions to even see how their own worldview goes about. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to do a little bit of a role-playing demonstration to see how this would go. So what we're going to try to do is I'm going to go as the person utilizing the tactics. That way, if anyone's watching, as well as some of those in the room, because I've been using tactics whenever I go into the live streams that I host on Friday nights, and whenever I go in dealing with the others. And in fact, when I had Doug of Pine Creek on Friday, I actually utilized tactics by asking questions towards him as well, by utilizing the Columbo tactic. And you can tell there is a bit of a shift and an inconsistency in some of the claims that he tries to put, that he holds a different standard against this criticism of Christianity versus just other things in general. So we're going to try that, and just simply know this, that it's about asking questions to advance the conversation, to learn more about what the person believes, but you also don't want to make sure you strawman them. So make sure you always sometimes ask, what do you mean by that? if you aren't sure of what their actual ideas are. Try not to be, disingenuous or forceful. Try to, generally learn and then use what you learn against them. So that being said, I know we have 2 people in here who, based on some of the testimony, used to be non-believers. We have Hunter and Rob. So if any one of y'all want to go in a role play situation against me for about a few minutes. I see Rob turned his camera on. It's like, I'm ready for this.
So hang on. Yep. Role playing as an atheist.
Well, I could do that if you want, but I want to know if that way to give a demonstration. If you feel more comfortable that you could be the atheist and I could be the Christian. If you want to see these in play, or if you got the general gist based off what I told you.
Okay, 1 second.
Sure.
By the way, I role played as an atheist, and Doug role played as a Christian, so I have some experience. I think I do his talking points better than he did when we talked on my channel.
To be honest, I don't even know if I would fare as a good role model as a street epistemologist, because the type of reasoning and questions are just so immature.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's the thing. I don't mind, like, whatever you think is an accurate representation or utilization based on your experience with them. I mean, feel free to use them.
Okay,
Aaron,
I'll try and do a Doug. So
okay. Imagine if he watches this.
Yeah.
All right, so we have Aaron said, Coco emphasized being nice, smart, and tactical. Let them demonstrate their point of view and their reasons for it. Yes, asking questions like, what do you mean by that? Okay. We'll read up more.
Okay, let's start with...
All right, before we begin, the one thing that I think is interesting is one that, like, Anthony Magnabosco does. That is, just, like, he usually puts a time limit on some of these things. So I guess, for the demonstration of this, let's say, like, we are meeting up in real life, and, we don't have that much time, so let's give, like, 7 minutes is what we got that you'd be dealing with. Actually, I'll give it 8, just that way we can get a lot more in there. So, like, let's say I know a bit of the tactics. You come against me as a street epistemologist trying to get me to doubt, and the scenario begins.
Shall I begin?
Yes.
So, RCA.
Yes.
What's more probable? So we were talking very probable, probable, neutral, improbable, and very improbable.
Okay.
So unlikely and very unlikely.
Okay.
Talking snake.
The talking snake. Yeah, which one's more probable or improbable?
Yeah, but is it probable that there's a talking snake? Is it highly probable? Probable? You don't know.
Like, are you talking about in most natural instances, or talking about, like, even if there was, like, a certain instance?
Well, specifically in this thing called the Word of God.
Okay, in that specific instance called the Word of God. For me, not a talking snake, but a sort of figure that I forget what the term.
No. Okay. Very probable, neutral, unlikely, very unlikely.
Okay, well, I mean, if you were talking about, like, the account, because I don't think there is a talking snake there. So, I mean, if it's about the text of the Bible, then probable.
This is shotgun. We're shotgunning you. I just want your feelings, your immediate thoughts.
Well,
you don't need to explain it.
Okay, so why do you want me to just simply not explain the reasons why I'm giving you the answer?
Okay, I don't know how Doug would respond to that one. Then the next thing I think he would ask would be the whole, like, the evilness, like the deaths going on in the biblical account, like the flood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just carry on. Still act like your own character about that. We got about 6 minutes.
All right. So, is God a moral monster?
Is God a moral monster? No.
Yeah. And what about the fact that in Ezekiel 20 he he finds it all right for the Israelites to sacrifice their own children.
That Ezekiel, that he finds it all right for the Israelites to sacrifice their own?
Yeah, in Ezekiel 20, he speaks about the fact that he gave the Israelites over to sacrificing children to
All
him.
right, could you cite the exact verse in Ezekiel 20?
I don't know the verse off the top of my head, but
All right, that's fine. But you're saying
somewhere
that.
in that chapter.
Okay, so let's go over this first. So you believe that God, that do you say that God's a moral monster for that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so if you believe God's a moral monster for that, by what standard do you call God a moral monster?
Doubt is a virtue.
Doubt is a virtue?
Yeah.
So doubt is the standard?
My own reasoning, my own thought processes.
So your own
That
reasoning would determine.
This is an example where I can only see this to be a human document. God's not talking to them. Psychologically here, all I'm saying is they perceived it as God, but at the end of the day, this imaginary being is telling them to kill their own children.
Right. And so let's entertain that idea, shall we? That it was some imaginary, something they imagined up, a God that they imagined up to justify their things. But that still doesn't answer the question why you think it's immoral, other than you said that you're using your reasoning and such. But by that standard, I mean, do you believe that your reasoning is subjective?
Yes.
So, in other words, what you're saying is that the only objection you have is of your own subjective opinion?
Yeah. And I don't. Why should my subjective opinion be? Well, it can be falsified, but why why is it wrong here when I'm pointing out the fact that this holy God allows the Israelites, which is his people, to do an abominational act that is no different to the other pagan cultures?
Well, before we get into that about, if that was actually the case that he's, commanding something immoral or not, I want you to notice that in your statement, you didn't say, while admitting that you use subjective reasoning, that is of your opinion, you didn't say that in actual practice. You said that he is a moral monster, as in it is a fact, when you're simply stating that this statement that you had is of your opinion. Would other people agree with you, or is it their opinion as well?
Hang on. So other people would agree with me? Who are these other people?
I'm sure there are some people out there that, there are some skeptics like Aaron Ra and others like Richard Dawkins who literally uses the term of calling God a moral monster and such. But then there's also people who would say that
I'm seeing it as he's a moral monster, because why would he do child sacrifice?
Okay. And that's the debate, was what's going on and how that is child sacrifice is what's going on in the text. So so what exactly happens in there?
You mean in the passage?
Yes, like what led to where
verses 23 to 26.
All right, verse 23 to 26. I'll pull up my Bible app because we're in the street, and that's one way we're pulling it up these days. I lifted up mine hand unto them also in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the heathen and disperse through the countries. Because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes, and had polluted my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after their fathers' idols, wherefore I gave them also statutes that were not good, and judgments whereby they should not live. And I polluted them in their own gifts, and that they caused to pass through the fire all that openeth the womb, that I might make them desolate to the end, that they may know that I am the Lord. So where's it saying the child sacrifice?
So it says, I gave them statutes. This is God speaking.
Right.
I gave them statutes that weren't good, and ordinances by which they could not live. I made them unclean because of their offerings. So they made all their firstborn to pass through the fire,
right,
so that I could make them astonished.
Right.
Then they'll know that I am the Lord. So this is 26 is the highlight. 25 and 26.
All right. So note that he uses the word wherefore in that passage, and before that, he's saying that they did not execute his judgments or go after his judgments. They despised his statutes and polluted his Sabbaths, and they were after false idols. And that's where it says, because of this, wherefore, I gave them also statutes that were not good and judgments whereby they should not live. In other words,
so what's a statute?
What's a statute?
Yeah.
Well, the statute would be according to the Strongs, an enactment, an appointment, and such. So what we're seeing is basically like a sort of command, if you will, but the issue is not necessarily like a literal commandment that he is giving out, but rather what we're seeing is a parallel of what happens in Romans chapter 1, where it says after they go after false idols. And note the language is very similar. Romans chapter 1 says that they go after these gods that they've created from the four-footed beasts, the creeping things made in the image of man and bird and four-footed beasts. It says, wherefore, using the same word there, wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanliness through the lusts of their own hearts to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. So what we're seeing here is an instance where somebody is being given over to their desires and given over to these false gods to practice these things, and it's as a punishment because that's going to bring the wrath of God on them, and they're going to be storing up wrath and bringing their own bodies to destruction, especially what we read in that text that you brought up in Ezekiel and what we read in Romans chapter 1.
So are you saying he gave them up to their own depravity?
Gave them up to their own depravity because they broke his commandments, and as a result gave them over to the just punishment of being just left over to their desires, and will be paid the wrath that occurs. So in other words, God's not approving of the child sacrifice any more than he's approving of the idolatry that goes on in Romans chapter 1.
So God is not to blame.
God is not to blame. It is merely the human being who has that human nature, just like we all have that human nature, and that's why we need a savior.
Okay, now I'm I can't play Doug anymore because I've already refuted Doug on that. So if I was Doug right now, I'd be like, if I was honest, and I'm sure Doug would want to be honest. He wants to be honest. He claims to be honest. He would admit that then that's not a passage he should use in the future.
All right.
So
that was the time. That's our time on that interaction. But I want you to notice some of the key things here before I point some of them.
I hope I was accurate enough with the whole animation with the hands and
who knows? Maybe you should find if he watches this video. We'll see. So let's go over to some of the people that were watching. So we'll start off with Hunter. Hunter, based on your interaction, was there anything important that you noticed that was utilized there in that interaction? Hunter, you there?
Is he sleeping?
No. I think the thing froze on him. Trying to. Okay. I guess until that gets working, let me actually see if I can message him. How about you give us your thoughts on anything that you found in that, Jay?
I thought you had him on the ropes a few times, especially when you asked him, well, what's your standard for why this is evil and so on, if it's just your opinion at this point. Mm-hmm. They either do recognize, oh, what I say is useless because it's just my subjective feeling, and basically there's no objective fact that says what God, if God actually commanded and appreciated the sacrifice of Israel's firstborns or whatever is brought up in Ezekiel 20, I think you guys were talking about, then why would that be wrong in the first place? And I think that's the biggest self-defeater of the complaints in the Old Testament, even though you can use context like you did to show that their original claim doesn't stand anyway.
Right. Hunter has revealed that there is bad weather, and so he may lose service at times. So I think that's what's kind of going on at the moment. I told him that if he wanted to join by his phone. So who knows? He may join back in, or he may not. But yeah, so those are some good points. One of the points I want to bring out is this: that it's also not a secret that the tactics does utilize a bit of the presuppositional method. And one of the behaviors is, as kind of Greg Bonson puts it, as that Scripture is the final authority and is being utilized there. So notice that whenever he goes to Ezekiel, that he mentions this one account, I go then to Romans chapter 1. And with Romans 1, we have a similar account, an instance. And so I use that to make the parallels, and that's what's important. If you can, that Scripture will be your best friend in these instances, and if you find like parallels as well as other texts that add on to it, to add on to allowing Scripture to interpret Scripture, that will be good. Yes, I can see you, Hunter. So if you want, because we went to Jay before the little problem there. What was some things that you wanted to note, or things that you saw in that interaction?
Yeah, I don't think it would have been that deep into Scripture, honestly. I think it would have been more psychological.
Oh, so you're saying that was an easy game for me?
I think more like it might have gone a little bit different in a sense of it wouldn't have been so. Do what?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Like, I don't think he would have quoted Ezekiel 20 right off the bat. I think he would have tried to play more psychological games, in a sense, than going deep in the Bible.
He did bring up Ezekiel 20 with Jonathan McClatchy.
Oh, did he? I guess he has his moments, but then again, sometimes he'll just go. He'll do a straight up epistemology and not go with. It's kind of like mind. It's mind things.
What he did. So maybe now, you see, it's easier to reformulate Doug's perspective if you think about past experience rather than imitate what he does, I guess, or act like him. So what he did with Jonathan McClatchy was ask him about him as a follower of Yahweh, specifically this God. Mm-hmm. Would he, say if he was in the council, and it's interesting, Doug is technically on the right track as far as the divine council is concerned, where God encourages his council to offer opinions. Mm-hmm. And he then asked Jonathan McClatchy, if you were in the council and God were to say, should I flood the people or should I just zap them out of existence? What would you prefer? And then Jonathan McClatchy's like, I don't know. I'll just leave it up to God. God makes the decisions here. But then Pine Creek kept pressing him on, like, no. If God gave you the opportunity to vote, which would you choose? Which would be less painful, I guess. And then Jonathan McClatchy kept saying, no. I can't, answer that question. Mm. And then Pine Creek goes, and this is the psychology that Hunter's getting at. Pine Creek goes, if I was given the opportunity to vote, I would say zap them out of existence. I wouldn't vote for because a flood means that there's a progression of pain, because initially people start to drown, then there's the drowning motions taking place, and there's like the crushing of the waters, and so zapping them out of existence is less painful. And so then he said, notice I'm not afraid to stand up and make express my opinion to God. Why can't you do the same? And so notice that's the psychological tactic. Mm. Then he brings up the Ezekiel 20 passage, and then he applied. He put Jonathan McClatchy on the spotlight again, saying, and this is his misinterpretation of the passage. If Yahweh could tell the Israelites to sacrifice their firstborn, would you do the same? Mm-hmm. Would you sacrifice your children? And Jonathan McClatchy was literally like, he just did not know how to answer that. So he goes, I don't know. I'll just leave it up to God. I don't know that passage. I'll just leave it up to God. He chooses best.
Yeah.
And I think the way McClatchy was answering, maybe it was nerves catching up on him.
Yeah.
But he said he was hinting, which in my opinion, I think every Christian would disagree with this. He was hinting that yes, he would go ahead with it, like basically kill his children. And then everyone in the seeing it in the chat, and even Pine Creek himself, they were all kind of like horrified.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a more fleshed out example of where I was trying to go with that example.
Which brings me to that point, is that there's another advice that's given whenever you have something like that occurring, where someone asks you questions like that, which is where I think like the tactics, like Columbo tactics and epistemology, are sort of the perfect yin and yangs to go against each other. Is that, if someone asks you a question, the main advice, give an answer. That's we're told to give an answer for the answer within our faith, but just don't fall for like the tricks that he allows. And if so, again, ask for clarifying questions to make sure you not only understand what they're trying to get to, as well as show, if there's an objection that comes out that just is irrational, then you ask questions to sort of reverse the flow of the conversation so that it progresses rather than just simply goes down a sort of planned script that's short and is just going to get nowhere. Now, that was the Columbo tactic. Now, before we continue with another demonstration, we're going to take examples of something. Now, I mentioned to test the consistency of the view. The other tactic utilized is called taking the roof off. Now, obviously, for some people like me and Hunter, who are, I don't know if you can hear on my mic some of the thing from my stupid rundown mobile home, but dealing with storms is what me and him deal with. And I think we may have lost a signal with Hunter again. It looks like he's just in there.
Should I, just for the fun of it, should I send Doug the link to this hang up?
If just to the, I would recommend just to the watching, because I'm just going to want to do this as a Christian thing to help benefit for people who don't know how to deal with some of these things. Because I'd be more than happy in another hangout to just deal with Doug one-on-one for sure, or even against multiple people for sure. Which, based on some of the things he's done, I actually do want to go over another point. But taking the roof off tactic is something that basically is sort of inspired by Francis Schaeffer. And according to Kokel, he says, quote, "The tactic itself is simple. First, adopt the other person's viewpoint for the sake of argument. Next, give his idea a test drive. Try to determine where you will end up if you follow his instructions faithfully. If you arrive at an odd destination, point it out and invite the person to reconsider his starting point." So what it's basically saying is like this: like you go to a car dealership, you want a car, but you want to be like, is this thing safe? Is it gonna kill me? Let me do a test drive, see how it turns out, right? So, and of course, here's my southern accent coming out at this specific point in time. But yeah, you get the test drive out, you take their worldview for a spin, and if you get to an odd destination, or in some cases crash completely, then you'll know that what you've just dealt with is a worldview that is unable to, or a line of questioning or reasoning in what's being argued to be something very problematic. So this is called taking the roof off. And sometimes you want to do this when pointing out certain things. An example used is, if Jesus could forgive capital criminals, it's wrong to execute them. That's the first thing. Taking the roof off is, well, let's take your reasoning to its consistent logical conclusion. On this reasoning, it would be wrong for governments to punish any criminals, because one could always say Jesus would forgive that criminal. This seems absurd, especially when Scripture states that the purpose of government is to punish evildoers, not forgive them. So again, go into Scripture as well as pointing out the fullness of their worldview and the inconsistency. And then therefore, even though Jesus might forgive murderers, that does not mean it is wrong for the government to punish them. So take their worldview for a full test drive, and then show what would happen if they were to come to that destination and such. So that's one thing to keep in mind whenever we engage in that. Now, I want to kind of switch things up a bit. So I'm going to be no, we're not just going to do atheist in this. We're going to try engaging just in general to point out other ways that this tactic could be used. But for the most part, we're going to try to do let's say I'm an amateur street epistemologist. I've seen a bit of the videos and such. I'm going to show a little bit of just simply asking questions of the Socratic method type of reasoning, which is, according to Anthony Magnabosco, what it ultimately seems to be. So we're gonna do another 8-minute session with JMD being the Christian, and we're gonna see how he turns out. And for Hunter and Rob, we're gonna have them again, give a critique and judgment. And y'all that are watching, or you're watching this even after the live stream, y'all feel free to comment on what your thoughts are on how this turns out. So what we're gonna happen is, again, another situation. Let's say this time it's on a college campus where you have a lot of people that are into free thought and other people that are looking into a lot of postmodern thoughts. So we're going to begin there. So we meet up. I see like maybe you have a Bible or some Christian t-shirts or something like that. And I start asking questions. So here we go. So Jay, you are you believe in God?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this: why do you believe in God?
Well, what do you mean by God?
Well, what I mean by God is something that's something all powerful that rules over the universe, that created the universe, and such. I'm not gonna put a specific definition on it because there's various other religions out there that claim that they have a God. Allah. The Christian God of the Bible. You have Jews that have a different perspective and thought of God. You have all these other things out there.
Well, the Christian God is.
So you'd say it's the Christian God that would be true.
Yep. No.
And no other God.
Yeah. Since they're all three in nature.
So why would your view of God be true versus the other ones? What evidence says that this one is true versus the others?
Well, what evidence would you expect from my God?
Okay, well, what evidence would I expect? Well, I guess I would expect, number one, like a God, like you could actually see him, touch him, smell him, something that we can actually test and observe. Then you have, a God who actually leaves like some sort of trace or something that we can reliably see and have for that. But that's what I'm asking is, like, can you provide any evidence to show that?
So do you think God is a physical being, and is your methodology essentially empiricism?
Well, I would say that, based on even some of the parts of the Bible, yeah, because isn't Jesus God in your view?
Yes, but this gets into the Trinity, which is three persons in one being, but ultimately God is a spiritual being, a non-material being. If you're a materialist, I have certain questions for you.
Okay, so if Jesus is God and that's a material being, then wouldn't we be able to observe and test to see, if God then is real at that point?
Yeah, historically speaking, with the Gospels and so on.
All right. But how will we know that he is God, rather than just these are stories that people later made up?
Well, it would come down to the reliability of the Gospels, whether Christ claimed what he actually claimed. If we have the words, I would argue for manuscript evidence that we do have 99.5% certainty of these are what Christ claimed, and then I would give a case for the resurrection if he rose from the dead then.
But what about but what about like when Muhammad claimed things like splitting the moon in half, and other accounts like he claimed that he got this thing from God? So how do you explain?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and actually this is a question for you, RC, in the Christian view. Is that in the Quran or the Hadiths where he splits the moon in two?
It's in both, and one it just simply says that he he splits it, that the moon was split, but in the Hadith it clarifies and says that that he pointed to the moon, and it's split in half. So it clarifies and expounds upon it, saying it's split in half because he pointed it out.
Yeah, I would just argue that based on the manuscript evidence, the fact that many imams believe that if you can't read it in the original Aramaic, then you're a heretic and you're going to hell, basically, and they can't even agree which version. It's nothing like the Bible where you have, English translations and slight variants. We have no original manuscripts or even close to that. And there's even a story about many of them being burned for some reason, which is quite strange for your God, Allah. And I would also ask, if Allah is all-knowing, then he would know that Christ was crucified and so on.
Okay.
I would say the source is not reliable.
But couldn't the same source claim could be made about the Gospels?
Yeah, you'll just have to show that it's unreliable.
Well, for example, we don't know who wrote them. They don't have the names that are written on top. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John don't appear until much later. So how can we know who wrote them when even in the epistles themselves versus like the epistles that say like Paul wrote this and such? You don't have that for the Gospels. You have, in John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. It doesn't say, here is I, John, who writes this unto you. I mean, how do we know who wrote the Gospels?
Well, you're right that it's not signed by Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, but we have church history, especially a lot from the church father Irenaeus. He writes about John a lot too. We have from that of the authors, but I also have a 4-part series on my channel if you want to investigate the question more.
All right, I'll take a look at it in my spare time to look at that video. So you're saying that Irenaeus, this man, he testifies to this?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong again, RCA, with my church history. Was it Polycarp who came before Irenaeus? And if that's the case, then Polycarp, I believe, is the disciple of John.
I've heard that Polycarp came before that. But you're saying that because that he got his information from Polycarp and Polycarp got his from John, that means he's Yeah,
they're right about this as well.
Okay. But wouldn't that be like sounds like some sort of, he's just telling them what to, tell people, since Polycarp then becomes a bishop, and, then he passed this to Irenaeus, and they're just like passing down what they're told to believe, but not actually like have, any actual statements from them that say this.
Well, I would go back to the Gospels, and if they are truly eyewitness accounts, you would expect them to be early, to have reliable information, to speak about this. Like in John, we have written down our account so that you would believe this. That's an eyewitness account being written down. And then you also have Luke, who does make explicit who he is and so on. So it seems to, and he also says this in Acts chapter 1, that he compiled these eyewitness accounts. Sure, he wasn't an eyewitness himself, but the history shows that he knew what he was talking about, and was writing as a good historian, and was getting a lot of his information from eyewitnesses. So this shows historical credibility.
Okay.
As well.
All right. So one more question then. Could you be wrong about God? Could you be absolutely wrong in his existence or in the way you view him?
Yes, but it's very unlikely in my view.
Okay, why is it unlikely?
Because I think there's a lot of valid and sound arguments for his existence that just add on to the probability and plausibility.
Okay. Well, I hope you gather something from the conversation we have, and I hope we meet each other one day. But I got to get going, and I'm sure you got to get going. And so there's the end of the scenario there. Now, of course, our reviewers had left because they had to get going. I can imagine one guy had a thing where there's where Hunter, he's got to probably deal with some stuff for college. And as for Rob, I mean, at least he managed to get in time for the thing we did. But that was definitely a good thing there. what were your thoughts on that? How did you feel being put in that scenario?
If you have pressed me on details, I don't have anything in front of me, so
Right, and that's what's gonna be important, because most of these things are gonna happen. Like, that's why you got street epistemology. It's gonna happen on the streets. So at least, at minimum, if you have your phone, you can pull up your Bible app, and maybe some notes you've taken down on your phone, but you won't have like an access to a book or a thing on your computer like we normally do. But so that's why you definitely got to make sure to kind of work it out in your mind as to how you're going to deal with certain things.
Well, and if they start pressing you on details, you start pressing them on details about their questions. That's why I asked you, what do you mean by God? And so on.
Which is in the book.
Yeah. Well, I've just learned that from, as with dealing with atheists in general, is, give me evidence for God. And first I always ask, even though we disagree on the methodology with God, but the point is that if you ask for evidence of what you want to be convinced of, you have to know what you're being convinced of and how you would be convinced of it. And if you can't give me that, then I don't go about the discussion, because what I give you will be
right. So we'll do another quick thing, and before we explain the next tactic, is something called a steamroller. Now, in chapter 11, Greg Kokel explains upon this, and what a steamroller essentially is somebody who here I'll let him speak for it. Once in a while, you will encounter people who try to overpower you. They don't overwhelm you with facts or arguments. Rather, they roll over you with the force of their personalities. Their changes come quickly, one after another, keeping you from collecting your wits and giving a thoughtful answer. If this description sounds familiar, then you have been steamrolled. Men are frequently guilty of steamrolling, especially when talking with women, but women can be offenders too. Steamrollers have a defining characteristic. They constantly interrupt. As soon as you begin to answer, they hear something they don't like in your explanation, interrupt, then pile on another challenge. If you try to go down the new path, they interrupt again, firing questions, changing the subject, yet never really listening to anything you say. You find yourself constantly off balance and on the defense. So here's some, we're going to give and this is going to be like a 3-minute example, because this isn't what we'd expect street epistemologists to do, but there are some who probably would be amateurs or that would try to use this. And I have noticed where they would even sometimes will cut you off, but it's mostly sometimes based on behavior and such. But so step 1, stop him when dealing with this. So basically say, you're trying to answer a question and he's going to cut you off or quickly try to ask some other question, just simply to be like, let me respond to your first challenge. When I'm done, you can jump in. Or is it okay that I take a few moments to answer your first question before you get to ask another? I'll give you a chance to respond when I'm done. Be kind, be patient when you're dealing with this. Now, step 2 comes to the issue of shaming him. If you notice this is a habit, and which is something that's part of the intent, because sometimes it's not always the intention. So here's how we do it. So you have someone who's interrupting and either with ad hominems or is just going to keep asking other questions and is not listening. You could say, can I ask you a favor? I'd love to respond to your concern that you have, but you keep breaking in. Could I have a few moments without being cut off to develop my point? Then you can tell me what you think. Is that okay with you? Then you wait for a response. Let him answer. Don't just then continue, but let him answer, so that way he's going to agree and consent to the thing. But if he says no, then at that point you realize it's going to start being a waste of time. Another one is, can I ask you a question? Do you really want a response from me? At first I thought you did, but when you continue to ask and interrupt, I get the impression all you want is an audience. If so, let me know and I'll listen. Another is, here's what I have in mind. You make your point, and I'll be polite and listen. When you're done, it will be your turn to be polite to me and not interrupt me when I respond. And again, as soon as you're done with these, saying, what would you like to do? Or, is that okay? Is that fair? Wait for an answer. You want to make sure that while calling them out, you be polite about it. And of course, if he, it's first you stop him, then you shame him. And if it doesn't work, step 3, leave him. Don't engage in the conversation with someone who's just going to be there to simply antagonize. So what I'm going to do is, I've been in several situations like this. I'll be the atheist again. JMD, you'll be in this. This time we're going to do a 3-minute one, because this one can deal with 4-minute, because this one is mostly about trying to deal with the statements that are being made. So let's go ahead and engage with this. So I already know one topic that I'm going to bring up, and I want you to let me know how this turns out. So here we go. So let me ask you something. Why does the Bible promote slavery?
Or does it promote it at?
Well, it promotes it clearly in the text, where it uses the word that you may own slaves, that if you get them to marry, then you can keep them as part of your property. It calls them property. It calls them their slave. It basically just reduces them to nothing but property. Why would a God that is supposed to be all loving do that, to just make people make people slaves and property to others?
How would you come to the conclusion that it's the Western view of slavery?
Well, I mean, it's quite simple when you have that the word slave is used. Slave, that means owning someone, doesn't it?
Well, can't the word slave have a different variety of meanings?
So, I mean,
and can't owning someone mean?
I feel like you're dodging the thing where I'm asking.
I'm not. I feel like you're dodging my explanations, and you have a confirmation bias. It seems like to me. Does the word
slave mean something else that's different?
Yeah, I think when we look in the context of it and do exegesis.
There's a time when slave doesn't mean a slave. Does that mean blue doesn't mean blue, or that a rock doesn't mean a rock?
Well, that's a false equivalency, because we're dealing with not something that you see, but rather a concept of human being at a certain time, which can change depending on culture and economic society.
So how does that work then?
Oh, the word slave in the Old Testament?
Yeah, the word slave, which, slave as in I rape this creature that is my property because I have the right to do that.
Well, I would deny that there's anything about rape in the Old Testament, raping your slaves. You would have to bring that text up.
Even though it is there in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 28 to 29.
Now, okay, asking a question from RCA perspective, is that like where they bring up rape and not slavery? Or is it like saying that you can rape slaves and stuff?
All right, pausing there for a second on the time. That's he basically noticed that I'm shifting to rape, because there has been times in the he's focusing on the transatlantic slave trade where there has been rape. Yeah. So it's going to try to do that, but he's going to go again to more points on that. So resuming.
Well, why'd you go to rape instead of slavery? Are you trying to avoid my explanation of slavery?
No, because I'm trying to figure out why God, this moral monster, is causing all these things to occur. He's allowing rape. He's allowing slavery. These are immoral things. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, first of all, what's your standard of morality?
Well, my standard for morality is being a decent human being.
Okay, what does it mean to be decent? What qualifies?
I mean, it's just common sense. Don't be a butthole to people. Be nice. I mean, I think that's pretty clear.
Wasn't doubt a virtue? So shouldn't you doubt your common sense, your intuition?
I mean, I've never thought about that before. I mean, surely if doubted, is a virtue, I would have to probably doubt, and I would test it. But I see that every single time it continues to happen. That we are good people. We all come to the same conclusions. Murder is wrong, rape is wrong, which the Bible doesn't do that. The Bible seems to say, go rape that person, go murder this person, go enslave this person.
So how would you determine that your intuition is reliable with morality?
I would suggest, looking at the fact that there's other people around that act like us, that know this is wrong. No one today would say, have this person to be your slave, or as long as this person is raped, as long as there's 50 shekels being paid, then that's fine.
Yeah, but at one point those people did. How do you know they didn't think that was right based on their intuition?
How did I know that wasn't they didn't think that was rape?
Yeah, but you're saying generally people think this, but now you want use your intuition to deny other people's intuitions. Shouldn't we just doubt all intuition? And if we doubt all intuition, shouldn't we just doubt that something is wrong in the first place?
Well, I don't know then how to answer that.
Then I guess you have no objection.
Perfect timing on that thing. So now, of course, that may not be how the conversation just ends there. There may, of course, be some things where it depends, of course, how you end it. That's the key. Now, notice you do kind of not just want to simply say, well, then you don't have enough intuition. My criticism there would be I would be like, I would think about it more, because that doesn't really sound like you have a valid, criticism or objection. And so, like, but I want you to think about it a little more. And if you can, if this is where tracks are always good, if you have something like that has something else related to it, or, booklets that you may have on you that could help out, that would, help give people, like, okay, you've had this conversation, here's some food for thought. And so, that's what we're going to want to deal with concerning this. So you did, overall, though, you did pretty good. And that would be my only criticism of that thing there. But otherwise, I'm surprised that, like, I did my best to, like, think of perfect ways to just interrupt you and even change and do red herrings. And you didn't tell me, to stop or anything like that. You managed to be patient and deal with it.
Oh, I deal with it a lot. But right. Jay knows my roleplay atheist since he lost me in one debate.
So yeah, there's what we got there. So, thanks for that. Now, Jay, you saw some of that, did you?
Yeah, some of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts? Do you have any criticisms for JMD in that?
I think he fared off pretty well. Actually, from the bit that I heard, it sounded pretty good. I actually don't have any criticisms on that. I think he handled it pretty well.
All right, now we're expanding what we had intentionally, because we have a lot more. We're gonna have more people joining in, and I want them to have a chance to participate and engage in this. And I want this to be about as exhaustive as I can make it for people that want to deal with this, because there's also other tactics that we didn't go over. Now, we got about 2 more tactics to engage in, or to expound upon. That way, that in case anyone's coming in and listening, they can then expound on and, probably sharpen their approach. Because there's the Columbo tactic, but you want to add other tactics into your thing. You don't want to just make it just that one-stop shop go kind of thing. So let's go ahead and expound on another one, and then I want to get Jay involved here.
All right.
Can I be the atheist next?
Sure. So let's see here. We're gonna again do it however you're gonna approach it. Now this one is called the Rhodes Scholar tactic. Now here's what the Rhodes Scholar tactic essentially is. So let's see here. According to the whole thing, let me see if I can go to the exact definitive thing. So first we're going to give the background and then the definition. Cover stories like these sell a lot of magazines, like What Really Happened to the Body of Jesus, or The Untold Truth About the First Christmas. You see those things on, like, Time magazine and such. They also discourage lots of Christians. Some wonder why these academic, quote, facts have been kept from them. Others don't know what to believe. They don't want to abandon their faith, but they cannot in good conscience dismiss the consensus of an academic opinion simply because they don't like what they hear. In situations like these, a tactic I call Rhodes Scholar is invaluable. It provides a way of knowing if an appeal to an authority is legitimate or not. The tactic hinges on the difference between informing and education. When an article tells you what a scholar believes, you've been informed. When an article tells you why he holds the view, you have been educated. So there's the difference. And he says the distinction is important. If you recall from chapter 4, if anyone's read that, and so I don't know, maybe something that GMD maybe have gotten into in chapter 4, an argument is like a house whose roof, which is what a person believes, is supported by walls, the reasons why he believes. You cannot know if the reasons are adequate to the conclusions if the walls are strong enough to hold the roof, unless you know what those reasons are. If you know the reasons, you can assess them. Without them, you're stonewalled. In other words, you're trapped. So things like assessing the academics, examining some of the things that are going in here. And why should I believe this person's opinion? Because, you may have some people like, well, you have, scholars that say the Bible is unreliable and we can't absolutely trust it and such. Well, why should I believe that? Why should I believe this scholar's opinion versus, I could go to another scholar that says of a different opinion. Why should I believe this one? And keep in mind, there's also worldviews that come into play. You have some people that, for example, in the world of scholarship, like Robert Price, a Bible scholar, but has the atheistic materialistic worldview and will have all kinds of interpretations as to what the Bible says. Even saying in one video that I saw, he believes that Paul, based on the other epistles, fits the description of the Antichrist that the apostles warned about. So he has this view that the apostle Paul is actually viewed as an Antichrist that is against the apostles. Then you have Robert, what's his name? Bart Ehrman, who, while believing in Jesus' existence versus Robert Price, then you've had people like, Bart Ehrman, who believes that, the Jesus of the Bible is not the historical Jesus, but it's a Jesus that has been misquoted and is much different than what you usually have. So here's what we're going to deal with. So that's some of the things of the Rhodes Scholar, just to clarify and give out some information there to people. So let me see if there's any other quick things we want to cover before we get into it. So, because it mentions, again, historical Jesus is part of the things that usually occur of it. And realize that just because something has a bias doesn't mean you can't use it. That would be the main fallacies you got to keep in mind, is that there's the genetic fallacy. And then there's the what I've been accused of in the past, and that is the appeal to authority fallacy. Don't just simply say, well, this scholar says this, but give the reasons. Remember, you can afford, and if you say, well, scholars say this, you're informing somebody. If you point out why the scholars believe this by showing the actual evidence, then you're educating. We must strive to educate people. And when someone says something like, Jesus didn't exist or anything like that, we must then demand, don't inform us, educate us. We must ask for the actual evidence itself. So then, and genetic fallacy comes when sometimes we quote things. And they're like, well, that's strange because, that's kind of wrong because that comes from a Christian source that's biased. Well, it doesn't matter if it comes from that. It's about what the information is. If you're going to attack the source, then that's logical, fallacious thinking. So that's what I wanted to inform, and we're going to try it again. Columbo tactic, the Rhodes Scholar tactic, taking the roof off tactic. Use these to your advantage, people, when engaging these things. Now, we're going to do another situation where it's an atheist played by JMD. And this time, we're going to give 10 minutes to allow Jay, Jay with just the J versus JMD, to be in the driver's seat, to engage in this. And we're going to do it for 10 minutes to expand it. Now, Jay, how much of this have you seen? Do you understand what we're talking about a bit?
You might have to explain it a little bit, or maybe go through an example, and then maybe I can understand it. Maybe
well, first of all, do you know what street epistemology is?
Yes.
All right, so you know how they're asking questions and such is their main focus?
Yes.
That basically you want to do that. You want to ask questions, much like where the name of the tactic comes from, like Lieutenant Columbo from the TV show. You want to ask questions like, someone makes a statement as an atheist, especially if they're asking you questions about that sort of seem to hint and suggest at making claims, say things like, what do you mean by that? If they are bringing up something that you truly don't understand, say, what do you mean by that? So that way you don't straw man or misrepresent them. Mm-hmm. The whole point is to make the thing progress as a conversation, and then, interact. So another one's like, how did you come to that conclusion? If you hear something where they make a claim of something like Christianity is this, or God does this, or is doing something that's not really there. So you say, how do you come to that conclusion? You ask questions like the Socratic method, which is what street epistemology promotes. We too should promote a Socratic method reasoning, where we ask questions at times, but don't like every single thing just be a question. But because if he asks you a question and you actually have an answer, answer it. But if you think that there's a flaw in the thing, then go at asking the questions and seeing if you can get the person to be inconsistent, like with it was mentioned in Taking the Roof Off, is taking their worldview to its logical conclusion. And then, of course, what we mentioned with the Rhodes Scholar tactic. So
the Rhodes Scholar tactic is, how do you know this to be true?
Basically, you can allow for utilization of sources yourself, but also when someone tries to point out these different articles and scholarly things, it's basically like saying, how do you know if an authority has been compromised? Regardless of a scholar's credentials, always ask for reasons. Don't settle for opinions. This is the key to Rhodes Scholar. This tactic protects you from being victimized by a common error called the fallacy of expert witnesses. There is nothing wrong with appealing to authority, but it must be done in the right way. You must ask, why should I believe this person's opinion? So he mentions that the way to answer this is, first, the scholar must be in a special position to know the facts. And however, if the authority is in possession of the actual information, then even a non-authority figure could still be reliable as long as he's using the actual sources. And secondly, let me see, where does they say the second thing? Because he kind of missed that. Well, I wish he didn't. I wish he would do a first. Oh yeah, and the second way. Why should I believe this person's opinion? So in other words, ask for the facts. And also make sure to, at times, if they kind of keep emphasizing, well, this guy believes it. This guy believes it. Why should I believe what he believes? Because then that gets it back to the main issue. It's about the information that one tries to bring up. So again, this is just going to be a random situation. It's going to be improvised. That way, it's out of the blue. It's nothing that you can really predict, and we're not going to just simply, try to act like we're strawmen or making up a screen. It's going to be out of the blue. So, all right. So JMD, you're going to come up to Jay. You pretend like you've never met him before, and you're just like trying to do street epistemology on him. And Jay, do your best. I got to use the restroom real quick, but I'll be back in a minute. I'll listen to most of the conversation so I can offer any critique and such. So,
is there anything? Do you want me to focus on authorities and stuff like that?
Do what you think. You're your own atheist character, street epistemologist character right now. So role play and think in a way that you would do it if you were this street epistemologist. That's the best thing about the role playing, is that it's about a character that you come up with on your own, so that it somewhat reflects you, but it's still a fictionalized version.
Oh, this will be fun.
All right, so starting, and y'all begin, starting with JMD, to come up and begin his street epistemology starting now.
So, I just met you. Well, I'm just coming up to you because I have nothing better else to do, and and so on. So I'm going to practice street epistemology. Are you a theist?
Yes.
Well, what kind of deity do you believe in?
I believe in God. Does that answer your question?
Well, what do you mean by God? God. You mean God as in the universe? I mean, there's over 3,000 definitions of God.
God, the Creator.
Okay, is that more? Can you give me more specifics on that?
What would you be looking for?
What you believe about God?
I believe that He created the universe that we live in today, and the world that we live in today.
Is that it?
Yes.
So are you a deist then?
No, I would be more specifically a Christian.
Oh, okay. So Yahweh, I see how it is. So, why do you even believe Yahweh created the universe in the first place?
Well, I would like to ask you a question. Do you think that the universe came from nothing?
No, I don't know. What's wrong with the answer? I don't know.
Because it could get kind of problematic. So, for an example, you have a cell phone, correct?
Yeah, who doesn't nowadays?
All right. Could that cell phone come from nothing?
Well, no, we know from observation that it comes from people, but you can't apply that to natural things. I mean, evolution has explained that away, the need for a designer.
And why do you believe evolution has done that?
Because we share 98% DNA with chimps, and we share very similar DNA codes with all other species of life. And we know that change happens over time. And just like how we test DNA with your ancestors, and we can tell how, who you're related to in the past, we can do this with all species, similar family tree, and go and stretch back in time and show, we all have a common ancestor at one point. Now, if you want to get into abiogenesis, that's a whole different thing.
So how could we observe this though directly?
Well, it's inductive evidence. It's not necessarily observation alone. We're taking the data and making the best conclusion from it. Well, in your view, you're probably a creationist. What are you, a creationist, or do you believe the Earth is 6,000 years old?
I'll be an OEC, old Earth creationist.
Okay, that's a little better, but just as long as we can get God out of the picture, you'll be fine. Well, why now you believe in millions of years, but how do you reconcile that with species changing over time? Because we know you would agree that micro change occurs, but wouldn't micro change over millions of years lead to in all reality, over billions of years lead up to macro change?
I'm not too sure about that. Couldn't give you an answer on that.
Fair enough, but again, this is a position that you hold, but you don't know how to reconcile it. I would just say, why don't you go with the scientific majority? The academics, 99.7% believe in evolution. So, and many of them are theistic evolutionists. So, why don't you go that step?
I think that science can be falsified. So I'm not too sure if I could trust that as a source of information to rely on. Just because there's a consensus on something doesn't make it okay or right. So, for an example, if you go back to the times of slavery, it was a consensus that Black people weren't, humans, and so
I have to stop you here. Okay. Moral truths, if there is such thing as a truth value to moral propositions, is not the same as science. They're two different methodologies. One is dealing with direct evidence, observation, repeatability, falsifiability, and predictions. This is something that we can do objectively, while morality is really just based on society, emotions, and so on.
Well, I wasn't really talking about slavery as a moral aspect. I was talking about slavery as in they used science to actually, by consensus, prove, quote unquote, that Black people weren't humans, or the African Americans at that time were not humans. They used science, and then it later changed. And
science.
So for an example, not for an example, but with that being said, it was then falsified by other scientists that wasn't true. So I think my point here is that one day we could maybe find out that evolution was never true. It could be falsifiable.
Oh yeah, and that's the whole point of science, that you can falsify things. But based on what we know now, not arguing from what we don't have, and what you seek to what you place your faith in, and maybe sure there's a chance of it being false, but we're talking about what you ought to believe, and what you ought to believe is the truth, and the evidence points towards that now. Sure, I can admit, unlike many of your theist friends, that sure it can be false, but that's just a virtue, while having absolute certainty, like many of your theists do, is dishonorable, I think.
Okay.
So you're basing your whole beliefs off of something that may a possibility, not plausibility. It seems like.
I think that I believe that it's true. Yeah.
Well, you can believe it, but just as long you don't teach it, try and get it taught in the public school system, which is based on science. So.
And so, and why couldn't we teach what we believe?
Well, in science, we're trying to teach what is true and what's most likely the case, not what people believe. Well, what if I believe in a magic rock that can grant me all my wishes and so on? Sure, it can be a scientific claim, but that's why I believe we could prove that in the future. So, should we be allowed to teach that in the classroom?
I mean, I think you would have to give a good reason to teach it. What would that reason be, if you could think of one?
Why? That's just the point. It's an analogy of explaining that if you want to teach your beliefs, you have to have good reason and justification, just like evolution has.
Well, then, so are you saying that you have evidence that rock does not exist?
No, I'm saying now that we don't have a good reason to. In science, we admit there's all sorts of possibilities, but we teach what's plausible.
Okay, so again,
we don't have the burden of proof to disprove things like flying spaghetti monsters, yetis, Bigfoots,
but do you
invisible pink unicorns.
So do you reject the claim that a God exists?
I'm definitely not convinced of it. I'm not saying there's no possibility.
So.
But it's not my. If you claim that God exists, you have to back that claim up. And I just reject your claim. And yes, sure, I'm not convinced because there's not sufficient evidence to believe. So that gives me my justification not to believe.
So that's an argument from ignorance, then.
How so? Wait. So real quick, let me get this straight. Are you arguing that unicorns can exist because we haven't disproven them?
No, I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that if you were to assume that because no one can prove that argument, that unicorns don't exist, therefore they don't exist, then that would be an argument from ignorance. How
so?
Okay, so let me give you an example. Right?
Are you guys trying to do SE? You're failing badly.
How so?
Well, would you like me to teach you?
Well, I mean, I think the main thing that we've seen with it is that it's about asking questions based on, especially what I've seen from Anthony Magnabosco. First of all, I'm curious how you got the link.
From Rob.
After I told him no.
No, he sent me the link about an hour ago, and I was out with my kids having ice cream, and I come home and I see this maybe half an hour ago, whatever. But I'm more than willing to give you some pointers on how to do SE against atheists more effectively if you want.
Well, that's what the thing we're kind of reviewing is we do have something similar, and it's called Tactics by Greg Koukl.
I would consider myself a Coca-Lite rather than an SEer.
A Coca-Lite.
Yeah,
sounds like a new form of a Coca-Cola diet name. They're Coca-Lite.
See, that's step one in SE is to get people laughing, get them comfortable, smile. This is like also serious and boom, I'm going to fight you, and boom, I'm going to fight you. That's not what it's about. It's to have a nice little conversation. It's like two human beings trying to understand each other.
Right, but you also agree that there's still. By the way, y'all just letting y'all know that the only reason I'm allowing with the thing with Doug at the moment because y'all times were technically up on the thing, which by the way y'all did fine on y'all's end there. But I do want to point out that at the same time there is all kinds of people that are out there that obviously are going to have different approaches in their behavior and the tactics. And that's what ultimately the thing was, and why we try to get multiple people on here, is so that we could go over the multiple different ways. I mean, Rob basically tried to, according to his admission, imitate your tactics. So he tried to be a little humorous and such. So he definitely brought that to the table. But you know, everyone operates.
I came in and I just clicked randomly at different points, and I heard my name, but I haven't heard the whole thing, so I don't know what Rob did. But but if the goal should be, so let's say if John is interviewing someone, the goal for John is to talk maybe 20% of the time, no more, right? And just listen, and then if whatever Jay says about, let's say, why he believes in Yahweh or Jesus, you know, just ask, why do you believe that? And that's it. You don't John, I was hearing you say stuff like, oh, so at least you're not a young earth creationist. Like, you don't say stuff like that because that raises defenses, right? You basically want to let the person do the talking and just, hey, but you know, why do you believe this? And then they give an answer and then say, well, if it was, that was not true, would you still believe it? If the answer is yes, then that's not the real reason. So you move on to the next.
Right. And so that's the thing, like, because earlier, while I did one that tried to engage in, you know, simply allowing him to, you know, elaborate his point, I also did a 3-minute discussion where it was emphasizing the steamroller types, which I've encountered those, and there could be some SEs or just atheists in general that will be amateurs and will utilize this, where they ask questions, but they don't catch on yet to the patience aspect, which I think both sides need to focus on, is, you know, allowing the person to finish the response, and instead he either interrupts or just out of his behavior sort of gets like very snarky and tries to move it to another topic.
But like, I would love to demonstrate, like, put the clock on for 2 or 3 minutes if you want, and so, but this is an interview, right? So, and you guys can do it back on
just me. Several different ideas and scenarios where someone would meet in the streets and would occur with this, and so that's what ultimately we're trying to do here. So, how about this? I'll be generous and give 15 minutes. Like, let's just say it's at that time, like maybe class just got off of a college campus, and the person has.
I don't want 15 minutes. That's too long. But anyhow,
for back and forth.
No, for an interview. This is not a back and forth, and then you can switch if you want later. Yeah, the SE is an interview. It's not a back and forth.
Well, no, I know that, but I mean, I'm talking about like back and forth as in like the Q&A and the exchange that goes on. Like, I know it's definitely some questions and such. But I guess let me ask that real quick. Why for street epistemology is it just like, you know, things like 3 minutes? I think that's kind of like what Anthony does. Like, he mentions that he puts it on a time limit. Yeah. Why is it reduced?
It goes over a lot of the times, though.
Yeah, it does go over. But that's a good question, RC. The reason for that is
it really like 5 minutes? But go ahead.
Yeah, the reason for that is it is very tiresome to always just be asked questions. And so to avoid impatience, to avoid being on the hot seat, you put a time limit on, so the person knows that this will end soon. And because a lot of these questions delve deep and it takes some processing power. And so you don't want to just leave it open-ended. You want to kind of say, hey, there's an end in sight here.
Hey,
so I can... So are you Jay?
Yes.
So if I was to come on the street, I heard John say something like, so are you a theist? No, you don't. You basically, would you like to talk about a deeply held belief you have today? And then you'll either say yes or no. And I'm going to assume it's yes. And then I'll ask, well, what would you like to talk about? And then you would say.
Okay, cool.
All right, so you want me to set the clock up?
Sure.
Is Doug gonna do it against me or you?
I think for you at the moment, unless or his choice. His choice. It's his buffet here.
Doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do, Doug.
Also, before we begin, that I have to shame Rob for. I told you not to give the link out.
Rob, you're in trouble.
he knows he's in trouble, and bragging about the Google Drive is not going to get you out of the situation. Boy.
Oh, that's I was just watching your videos, Rob. Oh, this is weird. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, indeed.
This is too weird. Okay, all right.
I'm gonna fly over to Australia and just send a bunch of kangaroos at your place.
That is
Don't
wild.
worry, I can box kangaroos. It's okay.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
I'm going to get going here soon.
All right.
Bye, JMD.
John, I came on for you.
Oh, did you want to ask me? I can do.
No. I wanted you to listen to how I'm going to ask Jay questions, because you were just asking Jay questions, right?
Yeah, I'll listen for 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, that's all I need. 5 minutes. So,
Right,
Jay, what deeply held belief you want to talk about today?
This is funny. Okay, because
It is funny
all the time. All right. Okay. I believe in God.
Okay. And would you tell me why you believe in God?
Why I believe in God? Let's see. It would. I guess it would be. I guess I don't believe this planet or universe that we live in currently came from nothing. So that's why I would believe in God.
Okay, so you believe in God, and one of the reasons you believe in God is because you don't believe the universe came from nothing. See, I'm repeating what I'm hearing. If someday in the future we found out that the universe didn't come from nothing, hypothetically, if we found out that it has always existed, would your confidence in your belief in God go down?
But that's not possible anymore, Doug.
Wait, hold on. It's between him and Jay.
Okay, ask the question. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
You said one of the reasons you believe in God is because something can't come from nothing. If we found out someday in the future that the universe didn't come from nothing, but has always existed, for example, or some other explanation, whatever, it doesn't matter, would your confidence in God go down?
I guess no, because it would depend on the situation that, or like evidence that someone presents to me.
Okay. Can you give me another reason why you believe in God?
I'll say maybe because of Jesus Christ, existence of Jesus Christ. Yeah.
So if you became convinced someday that Jesus Christ did not exist, would your confidence in God go down?
Yeah.
It would. Okay. So is it what would you have to see to figure out whether or not Jesus existed or not?
What would I have to? Okay, so you're asking me two questions. So you're saying, what would I have to see to believe in Jesus, or?
Yeah. So,
okay.
So you're saying you believe in God just because of the fact that Jesus existed. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And why do you believe in God because of Jesus existing?
Okay. Because of the church. That's why. Yeah.
Why?
I received information on the church, and the history of the church points back to Jesus Christ's existence. I don't think that the church would exist without Jesus Christ.
Okay, so the existence of the church is the reason that you believe that Jesus exists, and the reason why you believe God exists.
Yeah.
Okay, so if a Muslim says to me, Doug, the reason why I'm a Muslim is because of the existence of the Islam faith, that they have temples or whatever they call them. Would you say that's a good reason to believe in Allah?
No.
So if it's not a good reason for them to believe in Allah, why do you think it's a good reason for you to believe in God?
Okay, well, because I know that the church, since I believe in Jesus and I believe in the church, I know that the church came before Islam. So, and it was way established before then, yeah.
So the reason why it doesn't work for Islam is because Christianity predates Islam?
Mm-hmm, yes.
So if I presented to you a religion that's older than Christianity, would you now say that that religion is true?
Depends on the religion. If you have a religion, Hey, we can go there.
But would that lower your confidence in the God you believe in if you found a religion that predates Christianity?
No, not really.
Okay, so give me
as I said,
So if the answer is no, then give me another reason why you believe in God.
Okay, all right, now, okay.
Because so far you've basically said you'll believe in God, even if the universe didn't have a beginning, or didn't come from nothing. And you said you would still believe in God even if a religion predates Christianity. Do you have let's go one more. Give me one more reason.
I wouldn't have any more reasons. Not that I can come up with off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Oh, perfect timing. Nailed it.
All right. So there's an example from an actual street epistemologist, folks. By the way, I'm noticing as well that in the live stream, for some reason, it's staying on me. It's not showing anyone else. I have no idea what's going on.
It's done that to me a few times.
So at best, what I'm probably going to do for this, hopefully it doesn't carry on to Ask RC Apologist for the next streams. But what we're going to do is hopefully for this, I'll make a thumbnail or little picture thing and do that so that way we don't make it too much seeing my face, and that way we kind of just give like a little general thing of what goes on.
You may have clicked on your name. RC.
No, because I tried clicking and unclicking. I've done everything I can, and it's like nothing. All right, so
yeah, am I coming up when I talk or no?
No one's coming up when they talk except me. It's like
for me, I can see everyone talk.
Yeah,
well, for the person watching, I think
Rob comes up when I. Oh, now I clicked on me. Now I come up.
No, I'm talking about like on the chat like the live stream.
Oh,
so yeah.
But John, are you still here?
Yeah.
Did you notice the difference?
Yeah, I sort of asked some similar questions. I guess I was a bit more hostile, but I was making up my own character, RCA said to do. So
yeah,
but I like that though. How you engaged.
But you notice how soon as Jay said that he gave a reason why he believes, and then if I remove that reason, he still believed, right? So I just moved on. You don't get bogged down into the like evolution or cosmology or whatever. It's basically we're trying to be efficient. The whole SE, the beauty of SE and even the Columbo tactic is efficiency. You don't spend how many live streams, how many Google Hangouts have you been in where it's just yabber back and forth for hours and hours and nothing's accomplished. So it's a way to just really focus in on what is the main issue. And every person is different. Every person, every Christian, every Hindu, every Muslim has that key thing that really drives them for why they believe.
Okay. All right. So before we get to some of the others, I wish Christian Man was still in.
Hey, could I get some criticisms?
Sure. So for me as the Christian, given the criticism, I think the main thing. And this also goes back to the other thing I noticed is there's also what seems like a lack of confidence in your voice sometimes. Now, of course, this may just be how you speak. I don't know. So, but I would suggest kind of like not always speaking low at times. But if you can, like if you know your stuff, be sort of quick to talk or vocal a bit. And also, if you genuinely don't know, then of course.
Yeah, apparently, I'm a really slow talker to Doug.
sorry, Rob. You're getting better.
But that's the thing. Like, there's always time to improve, and that's where experience helps out with that. So that's why we need to get ourselves more involved in these kinds of conversations. This is why I hope the one thing that I learned that's in tactics is, and I guess of course the same thing is usually mentioned in the street epistemologist stuff as well, is role playing, and that's why what we're kind of doing with the street epistemology, and then of course the tactics is we're trying to promote a thing where it's not in the streets and it's not necessarily in like we're not going on to Doug's things yet, but we're having it in a zone where we're able to sharpen each other, help iron sharpen iron at this point, so that whenever we go out, people are able to know what to expect on a basic level, and then just go out and engage with the actual thing, so that way you at least have some idea, and then you can learn the rest on your own, but at least have some, like a basic sword shield. Basically, like every first level of a RPG video game that you start up. You get like that basic sword and shield, then armor, and then you got to work your way up and all that kind of stuff based off of going through all the levels in the different zones. That's ultimately what's happening here.
Besides, like I missed most of this live stream, but besides leading children to hell, what's your biggest complaint about SE?
Mine?
Any of you? If you have any, maybe you do.
I guess mine would be based off of one video I've seen from Anthony Magnabosco in his tutorials, and I think this is some of the, I did do a video review of based on what I've read a bit of the book, A Manual for Creating Atheists, where that philosopher expounds on it a bit. But the other one from Anthony Magnabosco in his tutorial videos and trying to teach people how to engage in it, he said something along the lines of like avoiding counter apologetics. And I'm wondering what that kind of means. Like when you say avoid counter apologetics, does that mean like, so you're asking questions, but if I were to ask you a question, or if I were to, start trying to engage in sort of like a street epistemologist or Columbo tactic on you, is that essentially meaning that we need to just simply that you are to avoid answering these questions in general?
No, not at all. No, avoiding counter apologetics means that the interviewer. So if, let's say, I asked Jay a question about first something can't come from nothing. Counter apologetics would be me saying, well, wait a minute, such and such a theoretical physicist says, no, we didn't come from nothing, that the universe, because of quantum, time can go backwards and forwards. And so it's you don't go into the minutia of cosmology, because then you end up having a Google Hangout where you talk for 3 hours and nothing's accomplished. You get to the root of why someone believes. Mm-hmm. And so that's what Anthony means by not doing counter apologetics. Like, I was a Christian, a fundamentalist conservative Christian, probably way more conservative than all you guys. and especially Rob. I'm sure, Rob's not fundamentalist at all.
I'm the crazy one, right?
Yeah. And so for me, it's really hard because I have to use all my energy to not do what I know, and say things that I know and so forth.
But let's
really
take
tough.
The cosmology one. I mean, where's the dividing line as far as how far you talk about that cosmological claim? Because Sean Carroll's statements have been refuted with B-mode discoveries.
See, Rob, exactly what you're talking about is what you don't do in SE, because especially in Jay's case, because Jay said that whether something comes from nothing or not, he still believes in God. So at that point, the whole issue is over. You move on, because the goal of SE is to critically examine the reasons for holding a deeply held belief. And if someone says, well, whether this reason is true or false, I'm still going to believe it, I'm hearing static.
Oh, sorry.
So whether something from nothing is true or not, I'm still going to believe in God, then that means that's not the real reason for the belief in God.
Okay, to summarize the SE tactic, then basically you're not concerned with the details, you're concerned about why that person believes. And so then the root of the problem is that person actually doesn't have a reasonable reason, or
no, there is no root problem.
No. I think I know what you're getting at. So Jay, when you actually put him into the corner, which is not a bad thing, you've cornered him.
There's no corner.
No, let me explain to you what I just got from what you were saying. So Jay, why do you believe God from a cosmological context? Like, because he mentioned the cosmological context. You then said, well, what about this cosmologist that says it couldn't be this way? And then Jay goes, well, I believe regardless then. And that's
but I didn't say that, Rob. In fact, if you play back the tape, I just asked them if it were shown in the future that something can come from nothing, or that the universe always existed, would you still believe in God?
He said yes.
And he said yes. And I said, okay, give me another reason why you believe in God.
And that's the tactic of SE, because then you're highlighting that he actually doesn't have a grounded reason for believing God. It's he just believes.
No, I'm just highlighting that that's not the core reason, because if whether it's true or false, he will still believe. That tells me it's not the reason why he believes.
But that obviously shows he's not grounded in his
No,
reason.
no, he could be grounded for a different reason. We just got to find it.
No, but
I have two questions for Doug.
But he gave that as a specific example as to why he believes, and now you've unrooted that as that not being grounded in his reason.
All right, let JMD ask his couple of questions, because he said he had to leave soon.
Yeah. Hopefully Doug won't keep me up till 12:30.
By the way, just to quickly summarize, I wasn't critiquing you, Doug, or the SE thing. What I'm trying to do is regurgitate or rephrase what that tactic is, and I actually, if you explain it that way, I think you're doing something that I like. I want Christians to be quote unquote unrooted, because I don't want them to just believe for the sake of believing.
Well, see, think of them. If I was to ask someone, why do you love M&Ms? And they say, because they're red. And I said, well, what if no M&Ms were red? Would you still love them? Yes, I would still love M&Ms. At that point, it's not about red, right? It's about something else. This is what I was trying to do with Jay. It's not about something from nothing. There's something else here. And so I'm trying to uncover that, unearth it.
Right.
It's not saying he doesn't have good reasons. It's just, it's probably not that one.
Right. And even though he started with that, you're trying to go, no, there could be something else that's more the reason why you believe than that starting point that he gave.
Correct. I think actually most people don't know why they believe what they believed, in not just religion, but it's belief is a very complicated thing. There's so many factors, right?
So if that's the tactic, to be honest, guys, I'm talking to the Christians in the room. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's a good tactic.
Okay,
it's like very efficient
way to.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's continue on with the demonstration. Wait, no. JMD had a couple of questions. I want to make sure that we get as much of this done, because I don't think Hunter had a chance to go in yet. I want him to give a shot at it, because I know you. We did role play that one time whenever we were at the college.
I just had a question for Doug. That's all.
Well, I have two, and I have to get going.
Let JMD ask his first, and then we'll get you to ask a question, because at least this also allows some insight into SE from an actual street epistemologist.
Hunter, the answer to your question is yes, and John, yours is no.
He has two, so you're only halfway done.
Yeah. So, okay, so my first question is this. So if one's reasons for believing is in the details, would you then discuss the details, or do you not care about that? Yeah, so if Jay would have answered yes to the my belief in God would lower, or my confidence in God would lower, if it was shown, let's say 5 years from now, that their universe always existed, and that was like 99% of theoretical physicists agree, then we would go into the details at that point and ask, okay, which theoretical physicists would you reject? How would you choose? What exactly about that would you need to see? Then you go into the details. But if someone's confidence does not lower one bit, if you give the counterexample, then you move on, because otherwise you're just wasting time. Well, for me as a philosopher, yeah, I would apply these same questions, but it just seems like when you get into the details, then no matter what, it doesn't seem like you can avoid the nitty-gritty stuff if that's where you want to ask about their beliefs and so on, if you get what I'm saying. Right, but it's not that you don't get in the details, but you don't get into the details for something that it's not the real reason. Okay. Oh, okay. So basically a useless conversation. I would agree with that. And that and that's what most Google Hangouts are. They're useless conversations about, especially between atheists and theists, and what are different, one sect of Christianity versus another. They're talking about things that really don't matter to them. But and there's nothing wrong with that. But I guess it's just, at that point, don't call it useful dialogue if you're trying to understand the other person's position and so forth. It's just jabbering on both sides. Okay, so I thought you were saying that speaking about details in general is useless, and that's where I really disagree with. But I don't think you were saying that based on what you just said. That's a useful. That's a huge misconception. Because in one part of Peter's book, which I have not read, but I've heard that one part of Peter's book, he says, "Don't delve in the facts."
But the issue is, don't delve into the facts of a reason if that's not the reason they believe. Like, because then you're just wasting time. Try to be as efficient as you can. Like, find the core reason why Doug doesn't believe in Jesus. Like, what is it really? And if I say it's historical, I don't believe in the historical evidence. And then if you say, well, what if I showed you this, this, and this? Would you believe then? And if I still say no, then that's not the real reason Doug doesn't believe. Maybe he was hurt in church. So then you try to find out what's the real reason Doug just doesn't accept Jesus into his heart. You try to find that core. Otherwise, you're just wasting time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I agree with that then. Okay, so my other question has to deal with the hypotheticals. It seems like with many of them, seems like you're saying, if my position was correct, would you believe? And for one, I would ask, do you think we choose our beliefs? And if no, then what's the point of the question? Because it seems like a lot of your questions are hypotheticals like that, just saying, if the opposite proposition is true, then would you believe it? And it would seem like to me that if we're a slave to truth, meaning that, how should I phrase this? Meaning that we cannot not believe the truth, then what is the purpose of asking these hypotheticals?
Can someone translate what John's asking me?
I'm basically asking if you're asking like a hypothetical, if God did not exist, would you continue believing in him? It seems like many of your hypotheticals are like that, and with that in mind, it just seems useless as a conversation to me. With some of your hypotheticals, because you're asking, well, if your belief, if something about like how you ask if the universe was eternal and doesn't need a cause, and would you believe God is the cause behind the universe? It seems like, generally speaking, it just seems like a useless hypothetical. I think we should just ask, well, is the universe eternal based on what we know? Like, I get the point of getting, well, would they believe independent of this? But if you're just asking these questions to get down to what they believe, then that's fine. But I think details are important.
I think what he's asking is that let's just ignore all these discussions, including the SC tactic. What are the data points as of late? And can't we just stick with those data points instead of asking the hypotheticals? So meaning the data points as in what's the latest in scholarship, peer review, whether science, history, whatever. So if you're talking about cosmology and Big Bang, the fact is the lambda CDM model is the model. Like there is no way. There's 20 different parameters that would have to be refuted if that's to be rejected.
So it seems like if all these were refuted, would you still believe in the Big Bang model? And to me, it seems like, well, if you're asking a rational person, the answer would be yes, and the hypothetical would. Now, if you're asking that to find out if they're rational or not, then that's fine. But if you know you're talking to a rational person and you ask that hypothetical, but you already know the answer, it just seems pragmatically useless. It would seem like, for the conversation.
Reed's in the live stream chat, and he said, we've heard answers. Reed does way more pure SC than me. I don't even call myself a purist, but he says that we've heard answers from people where it doesn't matter if their belief is true, and they'll admit that. They'll say, whether it's true or not, I'm going to believe this.
Right. And I've noticed that in some of the videos that I've seen. That's why I think that, there are people like with many that, like apologetics wasn't as stressed as a big thing as it was back then, as it was just, I believe this because I just simply believe it, instead of going into doing the much research and such. But whenever, I've seen where, they're going to say the things they've heard in research, but then when other people have found more research that sort of counteracts what they've had, then they go back into what you said. Like, they believe it even if they've got no reason to. And so that's ultimately the whole point of this video, is to try to demonstrate a way to deal with some of this stuff, and show that, of course, we have to do a lot more research into the thing. But Hunter's got a question, okay. And then I want to do two more things. One with Hunter and the whole thing, and you being the the person that's critiquing the street epistemologist. And then I want to us end the whole thing. Me and you, Doug, one-on-one, 5 minutes. see how that goes, where an actual street epistemologist gets involved.
I'm gonna get going. By the way.
All right, we'll see you later, JMD.
See you.
All right. So Hunter, what's your question?
Hey, Doug.
Hi, Hunter.
Long time. I was gonna ask, instead of doing hypotheticals, why not just deal with the data?
Well, we don't know what data to deal with until we can figure out the reason for the belief.
So, given like the data behind, like for instance, there's a lot of data behind why people believe certain things, right? Like anybody can come up with the argument and something. But when somebody brings up the data, why not kind of go more into that to try to find out instead of just going into a hypothetical and drawing it out? Like for instance,
it's a waste of time if that's not the real reason why they believe.
Well, like for instance, Jay brought up like the cause behind the universe, right? And like if you can bring up an alternative, but there's no data to go to that side saying like it's something else, then why even bother if it's not even backed up by anything?
It's because the whole issue is what would make you more confident or what would make you less confident? What would change your mind? So even think politics, for example. If you got this hardcore Democrat who just thinks Republicans are evil, and you ask them, well, why do you think that? And they give you a reason. I say, okay, if I remove that reason, would you still think Republicans are evil? Yes, I would. Well, then that's not the reason. So why waste time talking about why Republicans are evil if on that reason that they gave, if they would still think that Republicans are evil if you remove that reason? So why waste that time? The whole purpose of SE is to be efficient.
Yeah, my thing is though, it's like instead of like bringing in the hypotheticals, where like you talking about like I'm talking about like the cause of the universe, right? Being something else that literally can be anything you can possibly imagine, which the mind is so literally big that you can probably come up with any hypothetical. Why do that instead of wonder like, well, okay, how do you know that? Like, why not go in that direction?
Because if that's not the real reason they believe, then why waste time if the purpose of the conversation is to figure out why they believe?
I guess the reason why like I would hold to that is because of the data behind it, not necessarily like if you were to draw it out. Because if anybody was to bring it out, if it's so backed up, I guess that would kind of push it forward. You get what I'm saying?
I know. I can. I don't know what you're saying, but I can feel what you're saying.
Okay.
Because SE is an apologist's nightmare because it doesn't allow them to throw up all the knowledge that they think they have. It stops it in its tracks and it frustrates the apologist. But I know so much that I have to tell you, Doug, I know so many things that you don't know. And please let me tell you. Yeah. And Rob's looking at me with a smile on his face because he knows what I'm talking about. Rob has all this knowledge that he just wants to give me. But if Christianity is true and those reasons Rob can, all that knowledge that Rob could give me, if that's not the reason why I reject Christianity, Rob's wasting his time. Why should I waste Rob's time?
Well, this is exactly applicable then to a young creationist. Because you, Doug, could be a young creationist playing SE. And me, in an evolutionary paradigm, can give you all this actual factual data about evolution. And basically you're saying it's unnecessary. You'll still remain a young creationist. It's basically wrong for me to have all this factual data that showcases evolution.
No, it's not wrong. All I'm saying is why talk about if your goal is to uncover the main reason why someone believes something. And I want to take this off religion because I think it's easier to see it.
Why do I believe in evolution? Why do I believe in evolution then?
Why do you believe in evolution?
Yeah.
I don't know. You would have to answer that for me.
Yeah, and I'll give you the evidence, right?
Right. So you would say, and then I would say, whatever reason you give me why you believe in evolution, I would ask, well, what if this changed? That's a hypothetical. And if you say yes, if that changed, I would no longer believe in evolution. Then we talk about it.
Okay.
What exactly would you like? How would you even recognize?
Yeah, I could speak about human chromosome 2. Like if that didn't happen, then there would be no humans. So. But the point is that did actually happen. So then, how can you then speak about a hypothetical when it already happened anyway? I can't now just be like, like as if we're talking Star Wars theories or something. Like, let's just go into imaginary world and think the what ifs and so on. It's already happened in history.
Well, if you're talking about a reason why something happened, but the question is, why did it happen? And if you answer that why with a reason, and then I ask you, but what if that reason's wrong? What would you have to see to make that reason wrong in your mind? That's what we're talking about here. Does that make sense?
But it's already happened in history. Why would we even need to discuss the whys? I mean, we can discuss the mechanics. The whys would be the. I mean, if you're talking evolution, human chromosome 2, if you're going, well, then you're going to talk into philosophy, and then you're going to talk into metaphysics as to, well, why did it happen this way? But from an evolutionary scientific context, genetically, you can explain how it happened. The point is, it happened in history. That's the point. And I think that's what Hunter's trying to get at. So why entertain the thought of, quote unquote, doubt that the what if, like maybe it didn't happen? You could change your mind if it didn't happen. When it's already there, we can see it in the genetic code with human chromosome 2.
Right.
I to be honest, Doug, I see where you're coming from, but at the same time, using the evolution as an example, I just don't get it. I don't get.
Well,
I don't
let's
get why
take an
that should be the
example.
main one.
Let's take a simple example, Rob. If I hold up my pen and you ask me, Doug, do you believe this pen will fall if you let go? And I say, yes. And you ask, Doug, why do you believe that? And I say, well, because all the times that I've let go of pens, they fall to the ground. And then you would say, Doug, what would change your mind on that? And I would say, well, if I let go of the pen and it goes up.
Now, this is good. Now, one sec, this is good. You gave a response that would be equivalent, and I'm not saying this is how you think. I'm just saying you're angling at it from a very simple way of angling it, which is,
I'm a simple guy.
A young child would give that type of reasoning. Now, remember how you just spoke about all this data? The Christian apologists have all this data.
Oh yeah.
So immediately I was thinking, okay, Doug, there's this thing called Einstein's field equations, and all this data can explain what gravity is, right? And then, in order for the pen to do unusual things, all of that data will have to be contradicted. That's where I'm coming from. And I think that's where you were trying to say, all that data is unnecessary, when actually all that data is a more precise way to explain what gravity is.
And that's actually where I was getting at as well. That's where I was trying to get at.
Right. Okay, so...
But before, Doug, do you have any response to that?
No, because any response I get will be another 5 minutes. So I'm
just a quick little snippet, and then RC can talk.
We're going to try to need to get those other two things out the way, and then we're going to end the discussion there, because this has definitely gone... I was originally just going to make this be an hour, but with more people...
To be honest, I think this was very fruitful that Doug came, and I appreciate you came and Doug. I think these.
Well, you're trying to save your own skin, there, Rob, because you weren't supposed to invite.
Yeah, don't think you escaped punishment from me.
Not really. I legit wanted you in here, but at the same time, I deserve punishment. So,
like, I agree that it's. I think it offered a fresh perspective to have someone who, I hope wouldn't have found sense with how we've done in here, but. He seems to, at least been willing to at least give us something. And I think this is where it's also going to be good, to where we can actually see the actual from an actual epistemologist that is on the internet, that gets discussions going and such. We engage with that. So I think this will be something, of course, we're not endorsing street epistemology.
Just quickly, I don't want this to go into a tangent again, but Reed says, Einstein's field equations could fit the model that aliens have been making gravity work this whole time. Now, again, why entertain those ridiculous, thought experiments that doesn't comport to reality?
We should have an after show and get Reed in then.
Because then for aliens to do that, they'd have to be outside the universal system.
Because,
itself.
Rob,
and now you're including God in that.
Because the Earth being spherical shaped at one time was a ridiculous hypothesis.
Hey,
That's why.
Hey,
So you're actually entertaining the thought of a 5D brain alien system that the movie Interstellar.
No, Rob, it's philosophy uses thought experiments. I think you recognize the value of thought experiments, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, well, then we're done.
Then we're done. Reality.
Then we're done.
All right.
Reality.
Real quick.
Okay,
real quick, Jay. Real quick.
Real quick.
Man, but then
Rob,
I have one.
Could you stay after the stream? I just need I want to ask some questions about a scripture, and then that's it. That's all I wanted to ask. If that's cool.
You can ask me. I am burgeoning with scripture.
Oh my God! No, we're not going to. No.
All right, so we'll see if Rob's able to still stay after this. So, all right, so here's what I want to do. I want to do this. This is where, of course, now we have an actual judge in here. We're going to see how this turns out. So, Hunter. All right, so
That's my name.
the last time we role played, you were an atheist, and I was a Christian. We're taking the reversal, and I'm gonna be the epistemologist. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm from the South. I think I know words. And you'll be the Christian. So
what do I have to do it? I'm not in the
because you're
field
training
to do it right now.
You're going to be an apologist.
Here's a suggestion. Why don't you take a belief that has nothing to do with religion?
Like what?
Doesn't matter. Like, let's say one of you thinks, I don't know, the San Francisco 49ers is the best football team, and you have a deeply held belief. It could be something as simple as like that, because I think there's so much baggage in religion, especially in a RC apologist hangout here. If you really want to learn SE, my recommendation is take it off religion to practice. It's not going to be as much fun for you guys, I don't think, but maybe it will. I don't know.
Well, for me it is because I like to see how where we can offer our criticisms and such on that. So I think that would be an important thing to go over. Is like, and plus to actually see if I'm actually going to be able to do it right, and you actually critique me on this, because I did take a little bit of some notes of what you said.
Wait, RC, why don't you just switch the roles and do it on Doug?
That's what we're gonna do afterwards. Is me and Doug, but we're doing you since you hadn't gone in on this yet. But Jay and
I don't really care to, honestly. That's just me. Like my back's killing me anyway. So
you're laying in a chair and you're talking. I don't see where your back comes into play here.
The chair is hurting my back right now. Not even gonna lie. But we'll try it.
Are you gonna try it or?
Yeah, we can.
All right, so I think so. Keyword apparently, according to him, is not the 8-10 minutes we've been doing. It's apparently like 5 minutes or 4 minutes. If I'm correct, there, Doug.
Yeah, do 4.
Okay, so 4 minutes, just asking questions. Now, just to clarify, because we covered various topics as well, does it have to just be limited to God existence, or can it go to various other ideas and the beliefs?
Anything, any deeply held belief.
Okay. All right. So let me think of something real quick to ask you. Okay. I think I'll just go with the basic one since you used to be a former atheist. So I'll guess there's reasons why you chose that, why you became a Christian, Hunter. All right. So let's try that. All right. Starting now. Okay. So do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
Also, nice day we're having, isn't it?
Yep.
I mean, all that rain that's going on, it's just beautiful to have like a bunch of rain come on us. All right. Anyways, so with that being said, like the rain that's been coming down, I mean, that comes from, you would believe that is ultimately like from God, right? That he like would bring it down.
No, wrong. Stop right there. You made a mistake right there.
Okay, let me pause for a second. What's the mistake there?
The mistake there is you wait for your interlocutor to make the claim. You don't provide a claim for him. You don't even hint at one.
Okay.
You ask, would you like to answer some questions about a deeply held belief you have?
Okay.
He'll say either yes or no. And then when he says yes, you say, well, which one? You don't say, oh, you think there's a God up there, don't you? You don't start like that.
All right, so then how would I do it then? If you ask a deep belief like I just did, then what?
What? Okay, so let's assume.
That's what I'm saying. RC and Doug should just switch the roles.
All right, you know what? Fine, there we go. Let's just do that then.
Okay, so you want me to be the Christian and you're the atheist asking SE type questions?
Well, I was thinking like you be the epistemologist and I be the Christian, so that way I could at least learn at this point. Because I think after that, I'm probably not gonna. You're gonna have to stop me and interrupt me multiple times at this point. So I'll be sure to take
just read Cordial Curiosity's channel. Watch how he does it.
That's what I'm gonna do. Is like that's what I've been trying to start doing lately. Is to find the different channels and such, and even went to the Street Epistemology website, which apparently has like locations of where tons of epistemologists are in like several areas, like has them marked in places. Like there's apparently a ton of them in Dallas. So yeah, so I'm definitely going to start doing a lot of looking into it besides just simply the book that I have, A Manual for Creating Atheists. So.
Okay, so let's get this over with. So 4 minutes on the clock. Deeply held. Would you like to discuss a deeply held belief you have?
All right. Sure. Why not?
Which deeply held belief?
Well, I mean, there's plenty to choose from. I mean, I'm not too picky.
Well, yeah. Choose one. It's up to you.
Okay. So, well, why would you want to ask me this? By the way, just out of curiosity.
I'm curious to know, my goal here is to critically examine the reasons for people that they have in holding deeply held beliefs. Now, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So I guess one thing for me would be, good question. So like of all the different topics that we could go over for this, why not?
Do you want to talk about a deeply held belief you have?
I mean, yeah, sure, but it's just the different. It's just what would we talk about? And that's why I'm not too picky on the topic for it.
Okay, so at this point, I would say, well, thank you for your time and have a good day. And you know why I would say that?
Why's that?
Because I can tell you don't want to answer questions about a deeply held belief you have.
Well, it's not necessarily that, though.
Yeah. Well, then. What deeply held belief would you like to talk about, RC?
Well, that's the thing. Which one? There's God, Jesus' existence, determinism. There's like several topics that are my favorite. Bible translations, the historical reliability of the Bible. There's like several things. All of which are things I enjoy talking about and having discussions of that I hold as my beliefs.
Have a good day.
All right.
So that's one. So RC, if your goal is to have a tactic how to deal with SEers, you're perfectly right. Just avoid them. That's the way to do it. Just say, I don't want to talk about deeply held belief. You're right on. That's exactly what you should do. Just walk away.
Well, that's the thing. I wasn't trying to walk away at that point. I intentionally was willing to have a discussion. But I wanted as well to be something that the other person.
The 4 people listening to you right now and any Christians listening to the live stream can hear as clear as a bell what I just heard.
Okay.
You were running, especially in this situation where we know there's 4 minutes on the clock. Mm-hmm. You're just running out the clock. Hunter, Rob, Jay, you agree with me that that's what was happening?
Can you repeat that?
Okay, never mind.
So the thing is, RC, with the goal. Okay, now I get it. I get what you're doing, RC, and I get what Doug is saying. Doug has a goal to get you to talk about a deeply held belief that you have. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you need to be able to pick out one of them. If you want to talk about determinism, then talk about determinism. You know what I'm saying? Now, right. But on the other end, RC, I understand how you're trying to say, well, you're trying to welcome something that person may want to talk about. Because I've seen Anthony do that before. He'll mention some things, and but it wouldn't be from the
RC
person on the receiving end. It would be from the person, that's asking the questions.
RC, I'm going to be very honest with you.
Okay.
What you just did, I would love to have live stream to as many Christians as possible, because they're going to see that, and they're not going to be happy with you.
Why not? That's basically what usually happens sometimes on the ask what topics when some things like that occur. And for example, like go over Calvinism.
When you answer the question, yes, I would like to talk about deeply held belief about what you have.
Okay.
And I ask you to pick one, and you spend like 2 minutes saying, "Well, I don't know. It could be that." Like at some point,
because you're asking a very broad question.
Yes, it is a broad question. All you have to do is pick one.
Right, but you're asking for what I want to talk about? Correct?
Yeah, that's
okay. I'm sorry, RC, but it's time to go.
All right. Well, I mean, that's the thing is like you asked me the question. I was trying to give you the answer that there's like multiple things that I would want to talk about.
I think Rob, Hunter, and Jay know exactly what I'm talking about, exactly what I'm saying, and are agreeing with me, but I'm not sure if they have the courage to admit it.
Okay. Summarize exactly what you think I am accepting, just to clarify.
That RC was just avoiding the question altogether after admitting that he would be willing to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like what do they call it in politics? It's like a filibuster. It's like basically, here's a tactic to deal with SCers. Stall, dodge, refuse to even get it going. Now, I don't mind his first question back at me, like, what's the purpose of this? But after he's heard the purpose of the conversation, he can either agree to do it or not. And instead of just spending like 2 minutes hee-hawing about what I should pick, just admit I don't want to talk about it and shake hands and wave goodbye. That's it. There's no hard feelings.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like you're coming and literally asking if I want to talk about a certain belief. And when I asked, like, what do you mean? Like just anything. And
RC, do you watch sports?
Not often. I mean, I'm not a sports guy.
What's your favorite sport, Hunter?
I like football.
Who's your favorite team?
No judgment, right? Right. College-wise, it's definitely Roll Tide, Alabama.
Okay. Why is that your favorite team?
Ever since, well, first of all, I actually visited in Alabama, became a part of their football camp and everything, or not became part of their football camp. I just got really interested in their football camps. I did football, got really involved in it, and just over the time period, football, Alabama, it was just all around, just a good team, and actually made a lot of difference with me when it came to.
So if Alabama became a bad team, performance-wise, would it stop being your favorite team?
No.
Okay. So what about Alabama makes it your favorite team?
Coaches, the team efforts, the fans.
If Alabama changed their coaches and put new coaches in, would Alabama still be your favorite team?
Yeah. I see what you're going
at.
Yeah.
See, RC, how simple it is.
I get it. It's more like tradition. Let me put it like that.
Okay.
Just once you choose a team, you can't leave it.
So let's say tradition was the real reason. Then we would explore that.
Yeah.
See, right.
And so it's like,
That's actually a more accurate asking of a specific narrowing down of it, of what's your favorite football team, because there can only be one at that point. You're asking to just simply discuss a belief that I have, which there are multiple beliefs that I have, of which that I absolutely love discussing concerning the Bible, the inspiration, the inerrancy of the Bible, Jesus, the existence of Jesus, who was Jesus, God, Calvinism, which even that alone itself, Calvinism is a complicated one, because then what do you discuss? Total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, determinism. You have all kinds of topics that go into it that are beliefs I have.
So, I think what Doug is getting at, is hardcore fanboyism regardless of the data. So, for example,
but Rob,
yeah,
you notice every question I asked Hunter in that short took 60 seconds. Every question I asked him was a hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
If their coaches left, if they performed bad.
Yeah, and and it highlighted a fanboyism, which is a very interesting psychological trait of everyone. We all have it. So for example, I'm a fan of the AMD graphic processing company, even though NVIDIA is more powerful than AMD. Yeah.
Like yeah, like actually, let me give a transition kind of thing. Well, not transition, but say like I was to say Drew Brees, since I'm in Louisiana right now, is the greatest quarterback of all time. Because he broke the stats, he's broken records and everything like that. Well, then, what hypothetical could you give to that, given the data?
Okay, but what's the claim?
That he's the greatest quarterback of all time.
Okay, so then we would say, well, what if someone defined greatest by a metric that he wasn't good at? Would you still think he's the greatest?
You would have to first give me the metric in which you would have to give that to me.
Okay, so then I would ask you, what metrics do you define great?
The stats given and how a quarterback is recorded with his passing, with his yards, with his rushes, and everything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, given with the set standard, basically.
And so then I would ask, if I found you a quarterback, that was better than Drew Brees and all those stats, would you then change your mind that Drew Brees is the best quarterback, the greatest?
Yes, I would change my mind.
Boom. You found the core reason why you think Drew Brees is the greatest quarterback. And that was a hypothetical. It still uses the data.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there is that quarterback out there that you just, for some reason, your mind just went blank, and I forgot about this quarterback back in 1900 whatever.
Yeah.
So we can be wrong. We're humans. We're fallible. And so that's the point of SE, is to narrow in.
Yeah. But now let's say that there is no quarterback. Like, the stats are given, it's been proven, it's a known fact. There's no change in it. So really the hypothetical is not really based on anything. It's just a hypothetical, and I can simply say, well, there is none, because through all the stats and through all the list of every single quarterback there ever was, there is nobody that reaches him.
Or just to be a little bit more in favor of Doug's position, not that there's this blanket statement that there is no other quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
It's now a very high improbability that there is another one.
Like,
because of the accumulation of the data points. So this goes back again to the whole cosmology discussion we had.
But the real issue is what would change Connor's mind, or Hunter's mind, on it. Sorry, I don't know why I called you Connor.
I get that a lot, actually.
but so you could be right, Hunter, that all the stats point to Drew Brees being the greatest quarterback of all time. And the stats, and if you define greatest by those stats, and if those stats are right, yes, you're done. But the question, though, is what would change your mind? And I already found it. It is, what if there was another quarterback that had better stats in those categories? Yes, you would change your mind. You now have a marker that would change your mind for that deeply held belief. And it doesn't matter. And I think the goal of street epistemology is to find those markers, to critically examine those markers, because if you value belief revision, if you value truth, if you want to believe true things, then you should have those markers that would change your mind one way or the other. In fact, sometimes you can even use SE to even make you more confident. There's Christians out there who believe for bad reasons. Right. I think all you guys agree with that, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And so what if I, as an SEer, can help Christians to believe for better reasons? Well, I believe because I had a warm, fuzzy feeling during a Christian rock concert. Wouldn't you want a guy like me to SC that Christian to show them that's not a good reason?
For example, I convinced Wayne and Hunter and all those guys to believe Young Creationism. Christians do that, like more, I guess, academic Christians.
Actually, and there's another way of putting it. It's called playing devil's advocate. That's also one.
Yeah. Right. But I really need to go, guys. So
just real quick, though, I mean, just to clarify, so when you come up and ask, I mean, do you honestly expect that some people, because I know people, especially like my folks and stuff, that will want to answer questions and such, but will say that don't stop beating around the bush, be specific. What do you mean? Which belief? Or like, because you're just simply asking for a generic thing, when some people like me could have multiple things that we are just as equally in favor discussing.
What you did to me, I have watched a lot of Magna Bosco videos. I've watched almost all of Reed's. I've never seen that done. I've never seen someone say, yes, I would love to talk about a deeply held belief I have and the reasons for it. And then when you ask which one, they are paralyzed and they can't give an answer. I've never seen that happen.
Okay.
You're the first person I've seen that happen to. And I think I know why. And I think
why?
I think because you are trying to find a way to combat, to push back against the SE, to have a tactic again. Well, the name of your video is Tactics for Dealing with It. Like, why do you need to deal with it? What's there to deal with?
Simple, because the one intention that usually comes about it is that it causes a lot of people to have doubts about their faith and such, the things that they don't have answers to in some of the basic stuff. So that's why we went over the word tactics.
Doubt bad?
Not necessarily. The issue about the tactics is utilizes the tactics as in like from Greg Kokel's book. So that's why we went over some of the stuff that it's basically tactics like the Columbo tactic and all that is the solution to some of these things, as well as the other part that is mentioned in tactics is that when someone does what is, basically like the Columbo tactic in street epistemology, don't be afraid to give an answer and such, and is also trying to encourage and promote and sharpen iron sharpening iron of when these certain situations happen. And so that's why we're trying to engage in these kinds of things, and that you coming on here would help out that bit more. But also at the same time, I noticed that when we're starting off that, I mean, you just asked a vague question, and while you say that, Anthony and all them others, they've never had come across that. That's the thing. That's not a survey of every single individual in America, let alone even let's go to Europe, because I know there's, based on the map I saw, there's street epistemologists in Europe. There could be people over there that are the kind that I just described earlier that will ask for you to be a bit more specific, or what do you want to talk about, because they honestly don't care what topic, but they will be more than willing, as long as you, of course, you also have like your own preference. You have those kinds of people. And if you're saying that, okay, bye, I mean, I'm not going to do what you said, that you think I'm trying to run the timer down, because face it, not much people will know about the timer if you don't mention it. That people are just wanting to be curious. But I could say that for you to just simply say that you're okay, I'm done, or never mind, that could be a sign that, okay, you don't want to deal with a certain specific topic or something. And I think that would sort of be disingenuous for me to just assume that there's sort of a cowardice or disingenuousness on your part. That would be disingenuous of me to assume that of you.
Real quick. So RC, are you expecting like more like of a conversational form, or are you?
Yeah, I would expect like that. I hope that, I mean, based on what I read from street epistemology, I think that's what the whole purpose was, is to engage in conversation versus debate.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that form too, but I think the goal is to do an interview.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it that way, when you're in an interview, right? You're in a job interview. You wouldn't ask any questions like to see if, well, you would ask maybe at the end a couple.
Gotta go, guys.
All right, see you later, Doug.
See you later. But you know what I'm saying? But you know what I'm saying? I think the goal is to interview that person, and it's not really like
but you usually interview on a specific thing, like when you see them, like they're promoting a new book or they're promoting a topic or something. Like you have, like James White did interviews, but sometimes that was based off of Islam, because it's, he wrote this book called What Every Christian Needs to Know About the Quran. And then did Calvinism when it's like the Potter's Freedom and others, Catholicism when he wrote the Roman Catholic Controversy, or then King James Onlyism when he wrote the King James Only Controversy. So there's always a specific thing that he gets into, and that's why I asked, like, because there's a lot that I could talk about that I think could prove my point in my case, or answer all of his objections. But it needs to be on a topic that I can't necessarily think of, because there's so many things I want to talk of. And I don't know why the heck Steve is calling me on Hangouts. So, okay, it says it's a missed thing, so I don't know what's happening there. But it's still ringing, so get off there. All right. Anyways, so yeah, there's like a lot I wanted to talk about, and I generally had it, but and I don't know what you guys think, because he says that I was trying to like avoid answering or getting into the conversation. What did you guys think?
Let me because currently Hunter and I are private messaging each other in the outside chat about what's just happened. And I think let's just summarize what's happened. So I'm going to put the cards on the table. I'm going to be bluntly honest here, RCA.
Sure.
When you and this is not a criticism to you or anything or anyone in this room. It's just I'm just laying the cards out.
Mm-hmm.
So at the start, I was like, oh, okay, RCA is making a hangout on this, and okay, if it helps Christians or something. Then there's the whole role-playing context, which at the end of the day, I don't like that stuff. But either way, we try to model how they were thinking, but we're presuming things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is probably the first time now that Doug has come in here, and we've been without any of this, where people are debating. I think we were all like as if we were just laid back having a discussion on this very thing, and there were examples thrown around. And I think now I finally get this whole SE thing that Doug was trying to get at.
Right.
And so, and the irony is, and that's the key word, the irony is that everyone does that. That's what I'm realizing.
Mm-hmm.
We've done it. Like, for example, Steve's just come into the room. Steve's done it with respect to younger creationists. You and I have done it with respect to people who hold different views than, say, you. When you debate people on the Calvinist issue, for example. It's just that we don't call it SE. All we're doing is laying out the models and getting to the root of the problem. But here's my problem with Doug's version of this SE method, and that is when he showed the gravity example with the pen.
Yeah,
he's not concerned with the minutia. He's only concerned with the simple perspective of, well, if the pen started to float upwards instead of down, then that disproves everything. Whereas me, because that's just the way I am, simple conclusions, or basically like a pseudo form of Occam's razor, doesn't fly with me. I want to see the field equations being tested in light of this peculiar pen floating up situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think Hunter was trying to get at it as well, and I think maybe you would agree with me on that you need to then extrapolate the data, but people like Doug don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to get to the root of it. Anyway, so the point is, this is a fruitful discussion or a hangout. I think I have a clearer perspective on what they're getting at. And the irony is we've all been doing that tactic in our own lives. It's just that they're monopolizing on the method and making it this thing called street epistemology, when really everyone's been doing that in some level.
Right. Hunter, did you have something you wanted to criticize? Because I don't know if you wanted to add on to what Rob said.
Well, I mean, just notice. I mean, everybody does a sense of epistemology. Just it's just different ways of doing it, I guess. But everybody has a sense of epistemology to their own self.
So, but did you think that I was like dodging, by the way? Like I was trying to get out of it, or was I just?
I'll have to re-listen to that, because I wasn't really focused on that.
Because I timed that we didn't even get done with 2 minutes. Like it was like a minute and a half of the 4 minutes that we was down with, and I was just asking for genuine questions and genuinely thinking, because like I said, there's so many things that I want to talk about in terms of my beliefs. But he make it sound like I don't want to do that. That I just want to just like avoid him, and I'm trying to cower in the corner.
Did he ask you we could talk about anything, or did he make that statement?
Just like a general belief, like just a simple belief. He didn't like ask for a specific clarification.
The thing is though, is like when he asked the question, he said, you were actually the one that was supposed to give the specific, because like, do you want to talk about a specific belief? And you were like, yeah, sure. He was like, okay, pick one.
So did he use the term specific though? Because I didn't hear that.
Well, he did say, "Do you want to talk about a very held belief you have?" And you're like,
Right.
"Yeah, sure." And then he said, "Pick one." So
Right.
yeah, that was the specific when he said, "Pick one."
Right, but that's the thing is like I have multiple very held beliefs.
Yeah, so you should have just picked one and then just went at that.
Right, but at the same time, I mean, I would personally, for me, and this is just in any general conversation, I prefer, having general held beliefs that I have of multiple things. Like I would like to talk about Calvinism, sola scriptura, all these things in one go.
Simply just by naming one of those, then that would have been where he was trying to go to. Just literally just naming one, like off the top of your head, if you wanted to.
Right, but that's the thing for me. To me, I'm not exactly that good with just simply doing something like that. For me, it has to be like on a focus, and that's why it took me time. Because the way that I usually think about it is that I get to, what do I feel like I'm in the mood for to discuss at the moment, and it's been a while since I've been in interaction.
Can I get my evaluation of SE?
One second, Steve, just very quickly. Sure. I'm teaching at the moment in my because I teach math and science, and it ranges from young, say 8-year-old students all the way up to senior level, 30-year-old plus. Just yesterday, there's a particular class of students that are very gifted, and so I'm already teaching them about Hawking radiation, for example, but in a very simple way. Jeez. To 10-year-olds. Now, these particular two kids, they happen to be brother and sister. They were asking questions about spaghettification. This is, I think, now a perfect illustration of what I'm trying to get at as far as Doug's, thing in this context. I would explain to them what that is. Now, this is what street epistemologists do. Well, what if there was a T-Rex that went into the black hole? And then I would explain to them what would happen to the T-Rex. Then the next question from the two kids were, then what about a Brachiosaurus then? Notice they now from the T-Rex, they extrapolate into something larger, and then something larger, and on it goes. And they keep asking the what-if questions. And then you'd give the answer. But that is, now I think I've got it. That is all it is. It's just the what if. Like, then what if you have VV sci-fi going into a black hole? Well, it'll just take a lot longer for it to be sucked into the black hole, but it'll still do the same thing. It'll still be spaghettification regardless of the situation. Mm-hmm. And so then, where do you go with that type of discussion? You can't go anywhere. All the person is doing is taking all this data and then organizing that data into an answer based on the type of question that's been given. In a nutshell, that's literally it. I maybe Steve, if you think I've hit the nail on the head, you can say so. Otherwise, if I miss something,
no, I think I mean I like your approach to it. For if you're going to do an analysis of street epistemology, and I didn't watch this. I was busy doing my own two-hour stream, so I don't know what the conversation was. So I'm going in blind. I can only give you my evaluation because I wrote to Anthony Magnabosco about my criticism of street epistemology directly. I need to take a lot of them on board. A lot of things you have to remember is this. I do recognize that street epistemology is just a version of the Socratic method. And a lot of it did come through Peter Boghossian, whose goal was to convince the theist that they were wrong, and basically was to promote atheism. That's not controversial. That's actually where street epistemology came from. Peter Boghossian is a very radical type of atheist. He believes that belief in God is a mental illness. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. But Anthony, who I like a lot, was trying to take it and make it into a more effective methodology, which I respect him for. But as General Hansalo points out, there already is a method that is the Socratic method. And I think the problem that I run into, and I ran into this problem the other day with a street epistemologist, I'm not going to mention any names, but the street epistemology guy did not know anything about epistemology. And I mean nothing. And if you're going to be out there questioning people's beliefs, you should understand what beliefs are and how they're justified, and how there are ways to justify a belief. Because what happens is that the street epistemologist is wanting to look at something from an evidential point of view, right? Most of them do not know what a justificatory thing is for a belief. They don't understand what pragmatism is. They don't understand what prudentialism is. They don't understand that most of our beliefs we hold are non-evidential. And all they're basically doing is trying to get people to question their beliefs. And I get that. I have no issue with that. And I like the street epistemology type things. But again, there are people that have beliefs, and they're perfectly rational to have their beliefs if they know how to justify them properly. And the people that they're having conversations with don't have the expertise in a lot of these areas to properly enunciate how they're justifying their beliefs. And I think it's a little bit dishonest in some ways. Because if the interlocutors that you're having don't understand epistemology, and you don't understand epistemology, then what the hell is the point of having the conversation? It makes no sense to me at that point, because the conversation I had with the SE the other day, I was trying to get them to evaluate an argument, right? And I'm like, if you don't have the skills to evaluate the argument, then why are you doing SE?
And that fits precisely with the analogy I'm giving with the two young children, because then you as an adult, you start to wonder to yourself, are they asking these questions, like repeating the same question but talking about different things about the same thing? Are they doing it just for the sake of doing it, like for a laugh, or are these students being genuine? And more often than not, doing it.
I think it depends on the SE person. Like, I know Pine Creek is genuine, right? Pine Creek, Doug, he's a genuine kind of guy. When he has conversations, I think he really enjoys them. I think he wants them.
No. When I say genuine or trying to have a joke, they don't think it's a joke. They're just doing it for the sake of like an agenda, instilling doubt.
Yeah. And I was actually really surprised. Doug just in the live chat said that the way I describe doubt, he actually agrees with me that doubt is not a virtue. Because I heard somebody mention the word doubt. It's like,
no, he would disagree with you, Steve.
I got to sneeze real quick. No, hang on. No,
bless you.
God bless you.
How do you hear that? I muted.
I know, but you said you were going to sneeze, so we.
Oh.
No. But hang on a second.
I'm watching you, Steve.
Wait. Let's Steve finish.
Pine Creek just said in the live chat, yes, the way you define doubt, you are right.
But do you disagree with him that doubt is a virtue?
He agrees with me now that doubt is not a virtue the way I explain it. Well then,
Steve, you deserve a Nobel Prize.
Read the answer. He just literally said, yes, the way you define doubt.
Y'all better screenshot that. I'm telling you.
I have to. Oh, he says, I have to go. Just know you were right, Steve. So I appreciate that, Doug. He's not listening now. But anyways, he could be trolling me. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it could be a troll. Yeah.
Yeah, Doug likes to troll. I like Doug, but he has a tendency to troll, and that's fine. But even still, I would love to go against Doug on that particular argument.
Like, did you see the part where me and him were going back and forth, or on the whole thing, or did you miss that?
No, I missed the entire conversation.
Because here's the thing.
Why don't you want to moderate one day? I will have Doug come on. I'll be happy to discuss the topic of doubt, and I'll go from a virtue ethics point of view. And I would love to hear his arguments on it, because if doubt is a virtue, then that means it is something by definition that we strive through for continually. And if we strive for doubt continually, that means that we can eventually doubt true things. And I don't want to doubt true things. I want to doubt things that are not true. It's a fundamental mistake for street epistemology people to try to think that doubt is somehow virtuous. It is not. A virtue is something you always want to strive for: courage, honor, integrity, things of that nature, right? You don't want to strive for doubt. And so they have a fundamental misconception of what doubt means, right? It's okay to question, but questioning is not doubting. Questioning is open-mindedness, and open-mindedness is a virtue. That's an epistemic virtue, right? Epistemic virtue is a virtue dealing with knowledge, right? It's virtuous to be open-minded, meaning that you'll take on board new information and process it and change your mind rather than being closed-minded. You don't want to be closed-minded to stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
Anyway, it's nice to talk to you, Steve. It's been a while.
yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
So
it's been a while.
let me just get you on this then. So you know how normally like the conversations would go, right, with street epistemologists?
Sorry, what?
You know how the conversations would normally go with the street epistemologists when they go out and do their thing?
Yeah, I binge watch Anthony's. I love Anthony's street epistemology.
So like with Doug, he asked, hold up. Oh, here comes your boyfriend.
I heard we were talking about doubt being a virtue.
Well, there was a little interaction that he had with Doug of Pine Creek in the live chat about that.
He was trolling me.
I'm just kidding. You sent me the link, RC, so I didn't know if you.
Yes, I wanted to see your beautiful face,
Oh my
which apparently
God.
is now just represented by a depiction of I don't know what character it's been slapped on, along with an angel and a demon on it.
It's still beautiful.
There you go. All right. So but
Working right now.
understandable. What are you working at, a movie theater? You got a green screen behind you. Anyways,
I'm working on some projects, but anyway, here I am. What can I do for you, sir?
oh, nothing. That was the thing. We were about to end this up, but I was going to ask like Steve concerning the hangout or like the portion where
I'm gonna have to go back and watch it. Like I said, I will, but I just was doing my own thing. Sorry.
Doubt is a virtue, by the way, RC. Don't let him tell you otherwise.
Well, I mean, I did actually one time when he asked me that. I think I agree that it's a virtue that we should have doubts in our life.
So which ethical theory do you subscribe that to, RC?
I don't even know the ethical theories.
Oh, so you have no ethical theory that you can actually make for evidence for that? I'm going to ask you. So let me question your belief on that.
Well,
what evidence do you have that doubt's a virtue?
Well, let me say this though. You said it.
Am I about to get double teamed here?
No, not. I'm on your side.
No such jokes.
Your dream come true.
What I'm saying is though, you said it was something that you don't always want to strive for.
Yeah.
I disagree because even if in the example of you doubting things that are true, even if you do that, the only harm that can come from that is that you find out you were right again. That's the most harm that you can do by trusting.
I want to personally believe things that are true. Mm-hmm. A doubt means you're not convinced of something, right?
Sure.
I don't want to be unconvinced of things that are not true. I don't want to strive for lack of conviction. I don't want to strive.
But all you'll do is find out if they're true. That's the worst that can happen.
But I don't want to strive for doubt. You don't want to strive for uncertainty. You want to strive for certainty. You want to strive to be uncertain?
Yes, I think you should doubt everything. Doubt everything.
So you want to doubt everything?
Yes.
Why?
That's just absurd to me.
Why would you want to doubt everything?
I know. I don't get that.
Because you don't want to let me give you an example. Jenny McCarthy, when she read that newspaper, even though it came out to be completely false, if she would have stopped and doubted what she was reading just because it said it was from a doctor or whatever the case was, we wouldn't have this anti-vaxxer movement that we have now. But if you stop and you doubt,
I think you have a fundamental flaw here. Look at do you believe that I exist?
No.
Okay. Don't troll. Do you believe that I exist? do you believe that I exist?
Okay. What kind of question is that? Because I'm having a conversation.
I'm doing this. This is SE in a nutshell. Do you believe that I exist?
I'm not. I'm having a conversation with you. I should not.
What the fuck is going on?
I'm going to show you how this works. Do you believe that I exist?
No.
Okay, then you're rational, and I can move on.
Thank you.
Okay, let me show you how. RC, do you believe that I exist?
Yes.
Okay, so you have a belief that I exist. You have a conviction, so you don't doubt my existence.
I don't doubt your existence.
So why would you strive to doubt my existence now? Why would you move from a state of being true to a state of being untrue?
Because you might be an alien.
You wouldn't,
but it would still exist, though.
Right. Here's the thing. I could have slight doubts.
No.
Hold on. Let me clarify. In certain areas, but at the same time, while maybe having those, I have to still insinuate, or at least hold to at the moment, that you exist, because obviously I can see you, I can hear you, and I think if I touch you, I could feel you. It wouldn't go through like you're a ghost or a virtual program or anything like that.
RC, doubt means lack of belief.
Mm-hmm.
That's what doubt means, lack of conviction. And conviction means that belief. Okay, you're
Right.
not convinced of something, so it's a lack of belief. So why would you want to go from believing me, which is true, to strive to doubting that I exist?
You wouldn't.
Don't believe. Wait, let me finish. You move from you're going now from I believe you exist to I do not believe that you exist. Why would you want to do that?
You wouldn't.
Well, that's why you don't strive for doubt.
No,
well, that's the thing. It's not.
You wouldn't doubt you because that's something that you wouldn't even like think to question. That's a horrible example.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm curious.
I'm not trying to say like. Here's the thing. I'm not trying to say like that. I'm like striving to find some ways, but you know, there are some things like that get brought up. For example, that I think that there can be times where we can have legitimate criticisms.
Why would you want to doubt my existence? I thought I were friends.
Right, exactly. But that's the thing.
Well, hey, let me make an
hold on. Let me finish. Is for example, hang out for a bit. But if someone were to, you know, try to say, well, there's some new claims or evidence that suggests that Steve isn't who he says he is, or he's even a real person and such. So I'm like, okay, I'll investigate these things, but I still will come to still have the thought that you still exist,
okay,
and that may still influence and will help come to the conclusion that after
doubt,
no harm, no
that
foul.
you still exist.
No, RC, if you strive for doubt, that means you want to doubt. That means you're going out of your way to doubt. That's what it means to strive for.
Not necessarily.
No,
it just means curiosity for the most part.
No, that's what it means.
Not at all.
I don't know how you don't understand this. If you believe that I exist and you're striving for doubt, you're literally.
I'm not striving for it. I'm
That's
just
what a virtue
curious.
is. A virtue is something you strive for. Go look it up. It's the.
Hold on. Listen, I'm going to give you the definition of what virtue means. Let me do this.
All right.
Virtue means a behavior showing high standards. Let's go to the next definition. Virtue is a standard which has positive benefits.
Okay.
So doubt is a virtue. It's a trait that has positive benefits.
Virtue, by definition, is the moral excellence of a person. People with exceptional character who make the right choices and strive for excellence in all we do.
And what dictionary is that from?
What are virtues? Virtues for life.
Okay,
That's
it's
a
not dictionary.
And again, what does? First of all, if you want to go to prescriptive sources, I could find you citations on this.
Well, find me one.
Right, but here's the thing to keep in mind as well. There's like, based on what I'm looking at, Merriam-Webster, there's like 7 definitions.
I
for
don't
that.
use
Exactly.
I use a much more prescriptive search.
Right, so I think that's the problem here. Is like our definitions are off base. We're using like 2 different definitions for a term.
One
of us is using a definition that is universally accepted. The other one is using one that is tailor-made to his argument.
Yeah, well, he's using a second grade source. I'm using a prescriptive source.
I'm just gonna come out and say this. I never thought me and Kyle would be on a side for something.
I knew we would.
If
and
you
me
would,
and Steve are on the same side.
Listen, hey, the majority of the people watching are on our side, RC.
Hunter, you're on my side? Okay, so
yeah.
Yeah, so here's some papers that talks about epistemic striving. What side are you on, General?
Is that you, Rob?
Yeah, doubt
Hey,
is
Rob.
not a virtue.
Yeah.
Hey, Kyle.
So let me ask you this. Does anybody in here know what a virtue epistemology is? Okay, so how in the hell can they determine whether it's a virtue or not if they don't know what the topic of virtue epistemology is? That's the very topic that we're discussing.
Because it's like saying, what is an umbrella, right?
Oh,
and
God.
if somebody can show you an umbrella, they don't have to know
Hang on a
umbrella
second.
epistemology.
Yeah, they do.
It doesn't work like
virtue
that.
epistemology.
Wait, Rob, hold on one
RC
second.
is saying doubt is a virtue.
RC is, yeah. He's your boy.
That's what Doug says.
Boys. Yeah.
right, just because Doug says it doesn't.
Yeah, I know.
automatically-
I'm just saying that's what he says, and I disagree with him on that.
Right,
Wait,
but
hold on,
I
hold
told
on.
him before to his face that it's a virtue, but at the same time I say like I would have doubts about the things that even Doug.
If it's a
believes.
virtue, then you need to
doubt
tell me
that?
what theory of virtue are you appealing to?
Yeah, actually, to add on to that, don't we want to strive to be right? Like
Yes.
if we doubt everything,
You can't
then
be right.
we
always.
get-
Well, here's what I'm saying. Well, here's what I'm saying.
Mechanism
I didn't get
That,
to finish.
well, hold on. Here's what I'm saying. When I say doubt is a virtue, I mean I would agree. We're trying to strive for something that's right, and I think there's times where we can no longer have that doubt. But there's obviously times where we hear things that we're going to have doubts. Like I'm going to assume, Hunter, like when you were a non-Christian, you had doubts about
you don't wanna
Christianity,
try
but
to
then
have
eventually you
But that's not-
got
that's
rid of
not a
those doubts
virtue, though.
after looking into it.
The goal
but
is to
that's-
not to
But
doubt.
that's not a virtue. Yeah, that's not a virtue, though.
You want
What do you mean that's not a virtue, though?
RC, if you knew every true proposition, you would have no doubt about anything, right?
That if I knew every true proposition, like 100% knew everything in the universe.
No, it doesn't have to be 100%. If you remember, doubt is lack of conviction, right? You don't believe something to be true. If you believed every proposition that was true, you could not have any doubt on anything, and you would have the best possible framework because everything you would be believing would be all true beliefs. That's what you would. That's theoretically what you would strive for. You want to eliminate all doubt. That's the goal.
And the way you do that is by doubting.
No.
What?
Well, I don't think it's by doubting, but did you start?
How do you
start from it?
How do you leave doubting by doubting?
Because you start out by questioning something. You know what I mean? Like if somebody says
right, but you're not saying, Kyle, to like
hold on, RC,
doubting to solve that problem, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Am I saying that you should doubt to solve that problem?
Like
no,
to
I'm
continue
saying,
well, there's two people talking at me at the same time.
All right, Hunter, go.
One of you go.
I was gonna say, why would you? Well, I don't forgot what I said because RC threw me off.
Why would you use doubt to try to get to a position of lack of all doubt?
Because that's a starting point. You're not instantly going along with something. You're not taking it on face value.
But if you're striving for doubt,
hold on. Wait, Steve, wait, hold on, real quick. What if doubt is a starting point? What's the end point? To not doubt.
Truth.
So to not doubt.
Truth,
right?
Truth removes all doubt. So yeah, I guess
No,
Rob. Hold on, Rob. Wait, so if the starting point is to doubt or is doubting, then the end point would be truth, which is to not doubt the truth, right?
Yes.
Right? Okay, so then it's better to not doubt than doubt.
But where did you start from?
Well, it's a tool. It's a tool.
Yeah, it's not a virtue though. If it's a virtue, you remain in doubt.
Total virtue. Rob, I love you to death, man, but you're horribly wrong on that.
I'll love you too.
I'm correct.
It's clear that I'm because we're gonna have to cut this off soon due to the how long is this? That guy started at what? Like 9 o'clock.
It's actually.
It's as long as my.
Here's the thing.
No,
2 hours. 2 hours.
If doubt is a virtue, and all I do is doubt, I can never have a system that's completely devoid of doubt. It's
okay.
Refuting.
I will end there because we got. I think the main thing we had from the hangout is gone to its a conclusion about the tactics for dealing with street epistemology. So we hope this helps out to anybody that has been watching this, so that you learn as Christians how to deal with the street epistemology. And of course, we have the appendix to this discussion, which is doubt a virtue, which at this point, not.
Stay doubtful, my friend.
Salam alaikum. Anyways, but yeah, I'm gonna have to reconsider the position after hearing both sides, because apparently I may have a misinformation on the term of it. So I'm gonna have to start looking into the concept of is.
So you're doubting your position on doubt, RC, huh?
Yeah,
absolutely.
You
should have started with looking.
There you go.
That actually helps your argument. Actually, you're doubting a flawed position.
All right. So, but anyways,
majority of people don't think so.
Hold on. Sorry.
Majority of people.
Anyways, we're gonna end the discussion. And of course, if anyone's in the hangout right now that wants to continue afterwards, feel free to do so. But for all of you that have watched this, we hope this benefits. We hope this helps out. Just remember practice this kind of the tactics that we've gone over with a friend if you're wanting to work on this, because these tactics will help you out, especially when engaging with the street epistemologists, as well as to keep in mind some of the things that Doug has said and tried to do, because that is definitely what we'll see them do, since he's an actual street epistemologist. But the main thing I want to point out, there are two things. Number one, some resources to help out, being the Tactics by Greg Kokel, which goes over some of the stuff we said but in a lot more detail. If y'all want, DM me, and I can try to get something set up with you to get your hands on this, because it'll help you out a lot. The next thing is this. I would suggest read your Bible, because there's times when something's going to be asked that's going to go to it as part of the questions that they may have. And you're going to need to know your Bible in order to go back to, you know, answering, because you need to know like context or cross references of other verses that fit that same parallel. Know your Bible if you're going to engage with this stuff, and not just simply go to this whole emotional feeling type of thing like what you have sometimes with the Mormons. Know what your religion says, and know what your Bible says. That's what I would suggest. So till then, this has been RC Apologist. Thanks for everyone that had contributed to the volunteering and the role playing and going over the criticisms and examining the tactics that we engaged in. And until then, I hope y'all all have a fantastic day. See you next time.